The lecturer is international fitness expert Dean Hodgkin, who has presented master classes and seminars to fitness instructors in more than 36 countries. Voted Best International Fitness Presenter at the One Body, One World Awards in New York, he has appeared on numerous television and radio shows worldwide. Hodgkin's articles on fitness and physiology have appeared in Great Britain's leading newspapers, including The Times and The Daily Express. He writes regularly for the top men's and women's health magazines throughout the world, including GQ, Esquire, Men's Health, and Women's Fitness. Hodgkin was 3 times the world karate champion and 2 times the European karate champion, as well as a member of the British karate squad for 10 years. Renowned for his practical skills in presenting a wide range of master classes and workshops, Hodgkin has served as the fitness coach for Nike basketball camps, training prospects for the NBA and 2012 Olympics. He was also named an ambassador for the Special Olympics in 2010. Hodgkin received a Bachelor of Science honors degree in mathematics and management studies from the University of Portsmouth. He continued his education at Leicester College, where he was awarded the Certificate in Exercise and Health Studies by the Physical Education Association of Great Britain and Northern Ireland, the leading qualification in the field at the time. Hodgkin continues to educate himself, obtaining numerous certifications in health safety and health club management, as well as industry-specific qualifications such as fitness yoga and spinning. By keeping up with the latest research, Hodgkin tailors workouts to maximize the beneficial effects of exercise for both the mind and body. The course guidebook that comes with these lectures includes lecture guides, anatomical visuals, charts, a glossary, and a bibliography. To get the most out of this course, you may find it useful to review these materials before or after each lecture.
Let me start by asking you a simple question. Do you think exercise is good for you? Of course you do. There's a whole raft of scientific evidence that tells us that appropriate exercise has a positive impact on our health in many ways. There's a whole industry of gyms, DVDs, articles, TV shows, and books that introduce us to the world of personal trainers, sports scientists, and health promotion workers. So we know that exercise is something we should all be doing if we're able. Yet, within this regular bombardment, there's very little insight into how and why changes occur during regular physical activity. How much do we really know about the physiological magic that occurs within our bodies as we seek that holy grail that is fitness? Now, my name's Dean Hodgkin. I've spent over 25 years traveling around the world to educate industry professionals and the man and woman in the street about a practical understanding of anatomy and physiology. My aim has been to teach not just the hows, but more importantly, the whys of fitness. This course is designed to equip you with the basic understanding of how your body works and how it responds to certain stimuli. My aim is to enable you to set and meet your own health and fitness goals, be that permanent weight loss, completing a charity run, or just simply having more energy to live your day-to-day life with gusto. Now, studies have shown us that about 60% of adults don't get enough exercise and 25% don't get any exercise at all. The recommended guidelines are 150 minutes a week, and if you double that, you reduce your risk of coronary heart disease by 20%. But a 2011 study in Taiwan of more than 400,000 adults proved that people who exercised an average of 92 minutes a week, now that's just 15 minutes a day, 6 days, were about 14% less likely to die for any reason while in the study. And that's not all. In this particular research, every 15 minutes more of exercise each day reduced the chance of dying from any cause by another 4%, and specifically from cancer by 1%. So just think about this. You could extend your life, reduce your risk of heart disease, diabetes, and cancer just by getting in 15 minutes or more of exercise each day. Now, surely that's something within reach of most of you watching this right now. Yet many people don't get those 15 minutes or more, even though it's clearly so beneficial. Well, why not? Lack of time, lack of energy, lack of motivation, lack of information. These are just four of the most common reasons. This course is designed to help you tackle and overcome these obstacles. We'll look for ways to fit exercise into your daily life and really understand what it's doing for you, so you'll feel more motivated to make a habit of it. I'm going to give you some tips on how to squeeze exercise into your day, whether you're at work or even in the car. Here at the Great Courses, for instance, folks run up the stairs in their day, in between meetings, on their way to meetings. There's a hula hoop group that meets in breaks. And the company sponsors things like walking teams and 30-minute-a-day fitness challenges. And those are big things you can try. But I'll also show you how to squeeze a little workout in at your desk, at the photocopier, while you're on the phone. Our journey through many aspects of health and fitness will teach you how your body is structured and how it functions. We'll demonstrate principles with practical examples based on sound, thoroughly researched fact rather than fad or fashion. Along the way, we'll be bringing in subject matter experts from other Great Courses to talk to us about the latest research in a number of areas related to physiology and fitness. We'll be talking to Professor Stephen Novella about some myths of fitness and the most important aspects of fitness as we age. We'll get insights into the impact of stress on your body and how to use exercise to counter those effects with Professor Robert Sapolsky. Professor Craig Heller will talk with us about some of his fascinating experiments on exercise physiology and the role of sleep and rest in recovery. And we'll hear from Professor Jason Satterfield, whose clinical research delves into the relationship between physical exercise and a healthy mind. We'll consider common health issues that occur through various stages of life, so that even though some might not relate to you directly at this moment in time, you could become a vital conduit, the translator for your family and friends around you who may be facing their own specific challenges and opportunities. If you consider my writing career, nearly 20 years in mainstream consumer magazines, as well as direct contact, I've literally taught millions of people how to improve their fitness over the years. And I've realized that there's a split between how people view fitness. Firstly, there's a group who exercise regularly, even fanatically, but don't necessarily understand the science of physiology. What's really going on inside your body as you work out, and how do you apply that knowledge to improve the quality of a workout? And then there's another group. This group reads or watches a lot of the science of physiology. They know what impact weightlifting has on bone structure, or how raising your heart rate regularly can strengthen the heart, but they don't necessarily apply that knowledge to consistent workouts. In other words, rarely are the two aspects of physiology interwoven so that scientific knowledge can improve the exercise, or so that exercise can improve understanding of physiology. And that's what I aim to do in this series. I'm convinced that you need both knowledge and practice to create a successful and consistent program of exercise for the rest of your life. For this reason, throughout the lectures, we'll have many demonstrations and graphic animations to tie the science of physiology to your physical body. You'll be using both physical and visual memory to learn the lessons. I'll close the series with a number of exciting workouts that will frequently refer back to the anatomy and physiology learnt along the way. We created a special studio just for these workouts. Let's take a look at it right now so you can see what I'm talking about. Here we are, and the first thing you should know is that we didn't build this studio just for my health. I expect you to do the workouts with me. Now, you can intensify the workouts by adding more weight, more repetitions, more sets, and I'll remind you of that as we go along, or perhaps by combining the workouts as you become fitter. As you can see, I have 2 volunteers in each workout with me, so you'll be able to see real people doing real exercise, learning the routines for the first time in real time. Now, if they can do it, I'm pretty sure so can you. Now, my volunteers range from their early 20s to nearly 60, and all of them try to work out regularly, but they all have different strengths and weaknesses. Some had perhaps developed routines which made them very muscular but not so flexible, or vice versa. And as you'll learn in the lectures, you need to work your whole body in a variety of different ways to manage life's demands, from having to reach for a jar on a high shelf, which requires balance and mobility, to preventing injuries, which requires strength and flexibility. Now, we'll use some very simple tools, all sorts of equipment, some weights, some resistance bands, a training bar, a weighted bar that we have here, benches, steps, medicine balls, all that kind of stuff. And I'll also point out simple substitutions you can use. So a lot of this kit designed for home exercise, available from most sports retailers, but we can actually substitute with some other stuff along the way, and I'll give you tips on that as we go along. So really, you don't need fancy equipment. All you need is the will to do it. Now, I'll lead each workout, and I'll use our 2 volunteers to point out things along the way, particularly good form. I want to make sure that you're doing it right and make sure that you know which parts of your body are working on each movement. So for instance, when we're doing our little squats here, I'll make sure that you're bending the knees in the right direction because it's a hinge joint. I'll make sure you're pushing into the heels so you're really feeling it in the right place, getting into the legs, getting into the buttocks there. And I'll be pointing out, for instance, in the lunge, making sure you get on the ball of the foot at the back, so that makes sure you're not twisting the knee bends in the way it's meant to, so you'll get that strength development, you'll get that toning effect without the risk of injury. So this really is a truly unique mind and body learning experience. Not only will it put sweat on your brow, but it'll put a smile on your face. He says, looking around for some smiles. So let's go back to the lecture studio so we can start to understand what fitness really is and what it means to us. All right then. Now you understand that this is an interactive course with demonstrations designed to help you understand both anatomy and physiology principles. So be prepared to participate. Trust me, you'll learn more and feel better if you do. So first off, let's clarify the difference between physiology and anatomy. So take a deep breath and stand up. Straighten yourself up. Yeah? If you can't stand up comfortably, just sit up straight in your seat. Okay, are you up? Now, what just happened? You activated around 302 muscles to stand up. The 26 bones in your spinal column shifted to lift your head and align your neck with the rest of your back. Multiple other systems engaged to enable you to move at all. On the simplest level, anatomy refers to these bones and muscles, to all the parts of the body. Physiology, on the other hand, refers to the interaction of these bones and muscles, along with the nerves, tendons, veins, arteries, heart, lungs, and thousands of complex systems working together to enable you to stand, move, and live. So physiology explores how your body functions. You can't understand physiology without knowing something about anatomy, and vice versa. So go ahead, sit yourself back down. Let's get comfortable. So how easy was it for you to stand or sit? Did you have to push yourself up with your hands? Did your knees hurt as you move? Or did you kind of spring up and bounce down? Each of you will have a different answer. Fitness then is clearly a subjective state, with being fit related specifically to your personal medical history, current health status, socioeconomic situation, and perhaps sporting aspirations. In addition, fitness could be considered in emotional, mental, and I guess even spiritual dimensions. There's no doubt all of these are interrelated. But for now, let's think about fitness in physiological terms and break it down into 2 strata: health-related components and skill-related components. Health-related components of fitness are defined as having the potential to impact upon our quality of life. So let's list these and I'll define them briefly for you. Cardiovascular endurance is the capability of your heart and lungs and circulatory system to take in, absorb, and use oxygen. Next, we have muscular endurance. And this is the capacity of a muscle, or perhaps a group of muscles working together, to maintain continued contractions against a low or moderate resistance. Now, that's different from strength, which is the force effectiveness of a muscle or a group of muscles. Flexibility is the mobility of the joints and their associated soft tissue structures. And then body composition. Now, this is the proportional segmentation of your body weight into lean and fat constituents. Now, skill-related fitness components, on the other hand, are desirable for many sporting activities, but a deficiency in these will not negatively impact upon your health, as with those we've just described. So let's have a look at these. Firstly, agility, which is the ability to change direction of the body or parts of the body, incorporating elements of deceleration, acceleration. Balance is the ability to maintain both static and dynamic equilibrium of the body parts as well as the whole. Coordination is the ability to perform a range of simple to complex movements with precision, with timing, with continuity. And so let's try that now. I did tell you this was going to be interactive, so this is what I'm going to ask you to do. Place your hands in front, palms down. You can do this sitting down, you don't have to go anywhere to do this. And your right hand, I'm going to mirror this for you. So your right hand is this one. I'd like it to move up and down, please. Nice and easy. Straight up, straight down. I'm taking it you've got that bit, so hold it there. We're now going to take your left hand and you're going to describe a square. It's going to go up and across and down and across. Yeah, up and across and down. So we've got our square. So what is our right hand doing? It's going up and down and up. I hope you're still with me. The left hand is going up and across. And in case you've not guessed what's coming next, can we do both together? That is the trick. You have no idea how hard I'm concentrating now. So a little exercise you can practice there. And actually, beyond that, there is a possibility that you might be able to do one hand and then do the other. I don't know. Anyway, who knows? Did that work? Let's move on. Skill-related fitness. Another component is power, which is the ability to achieve optimal force development of the voluntary muscles, but in a minimal time period. Reaction speed is the ability to recruit selected neuromuscular responses with a minimal time delay. So taking into account the many influences on total fitness, therefore, it's easy to see why there are so many different ways of exercising, as a program designed to improve one of these components will not satisfy the others. Let's concentrate on the first group, the health-related fitness components, as these are clearly of greater significance to most of us. So let's now look at each of these in a little more detail. Cardiovascular endurance is also referred to as cardiorespiratory fitness, CV, cardio, stamina, aerobic fitness, but all of these have the same definition. Cardiovascular endurance is the body's ability to intake oxygen, transport it through the blood, and then use it in the exercising muscles. Naturally, this ability is improved through specific activity, usually involving a number of large muscle groups and sustained for a certain length of time. Prime examples being aerobics, jogging, cycling. Now, the American College of Sports Medicine recommends around 30 minutes at medium intensity on 5 days per week, or 20 minutes at high intensity on 3 days per week. Now, whilst these are minimum thresholds for maintaining health and reducing risk of disease, greater gains and specific goals such as weight loss will be achieved with 60 minutes, although this can be achieved piecemeal fashion. As I mentioned earlier, even 15 minutes will do a lot of good, so you can build up time as your body strengthens. So, how really does exercise lead to positive change? To begin answering that question, let's look at the anatomy involved. It all starts in the lungs. The inspiration of oxygen is the beginning of the process. And in response to the increased demands of exercise, the lungs, they don't actually become larger. Instead, the body learns to absorb more of the oxygen so that more can be taken in with each breath. Over a period of time, the diaphragm, the intercostal muscles, and the pectoralis minor that control respiration all become more efficient and able to work for longer at higher intensities. Oxygen is then transported in the blood. A key response to exercise is that there is an increase in both the total blood volume and the concentration of red cells, which are the carriers. In time, your body grows more capillaries to deliver more oxygen faster and more efficiently. The blood takes the oxygen to the heart via the pulmonary veins, from where it's pumped around the whole body. Working out leads to the heart being able to hold more blood. The wall of the heart becomes stronger, so an increased amount of blood is ejected with each beat. The body is then able to accommodate higher intensities of exercise. A byproduct is that the stronger heart will be able to work less hard when resting, so your resting pulse will drop. Within the muscle cells, we have mitochondria that break down food for fuel, and these use the oxygen delivered by the blood to go about their work. As a response to exercise, the number and the size of these mitochondria increase, so the muscles are able to use more oxygen and so sustain greater effort for longer periods of time. Exercise also causes a change in the way fats are transported in the blood by increasing the ratio of high-density lipoproteins to low-density, the latter being associated with the accumulation of fatty deposits on the walls of the blood vessels, which leads to the condition atherosclerosis. In other words, exercise helps to reduce low-density lipoproteins, also called the bad cholesterol, while increasing the amount of good cholesterol, or HDL. It's no surprise, then, that research reveals a simple shift from low cardiovascular fitness to moderate can reduce death due to cardiovascular disease by as much as, get ready for this, 66% in men and 50% in women. So finally, let's consider the ideal exercise format to improve your cardiovascular fitness. Firstly, and this is a common thread you'll notice coming up in this series, warm-up. We always begin with a warm-up, using gentle, flowing movements of the major limbs, beginning small and gradually increasing in amplitude and effort, working through all the joints. The workout phase, featuring continuous rhythmic movement that maintains an intensity of anywhere between 55 and 90% of your maximum heart rate, which in the most basic form we calculate by subtracting your age from the number 220. And you'll be doing that for between 20 to 60 minutes, dependent upon your current fitness level. And then, no surprise, we have a cool down at the end by incrementally lowering the intensity, as a sudden stop may cause fainting due to the blood pooling in your muscles and reducing the amount of oxygen getting to your brain. And this can then be followed by some static stretching for the major muscle groups. Within this series, there's a whole lecture dedicated to the cardiovascular system, so we can examine these items just mentioned in a little bit more detail then. We can investigate the next two health-related fitness components together, as muscular endurance and strength can really be viewed as, let's say, two sides of the same coin. They're different, but functionally complement each other. Healthy muscles are fundamental to quality of life, enabling us to explore different forms of play as a child, to work at a manual job as an adult, and to carry your offspring as a parent. Later life, maintaining your independence. While ceaseless endurance and Herculean strength may be the stuff of sporting legend, the basic functional ability to stand up from a chair unaided is perhaps the best way to put into perspective the importance of muscle health. Taking care of your muscles can ensure you are able to execute daily activities, and you can be physically active whatever your age. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention recommend twice weekly strength endurance training. And you'll be encouraged to know that studies have shown that older adults get the same benefits from exercise strength training as those who are middle-aged or younger. To try to understand how strength training in terms of strength and endurance relate to each other, let's refer to the Oxford Dictionary of Sports Science and Medicine. And what this says is that we look at a continuum that ranges from strength at one end to endurance at the other end. So absolute strength is something we quantify in terms of what's called the one repetition max. And that's the greatest amount of weight you can lift just once with correct technique. At the endurance end, the number of repetitions increases and the load decreases. In everyday terms, moving a sofa will fall to the left end of the line, whereas sweeping the drive will perhaps be on the right. Now, this is very useful then, as it enables us to prescribe the correct exercise program to achieve desired outcomes. But first, let's uncover just how the body adapts to these two different challenges. Muscular endurance is the repeated and sustained contractions of the target muscle or group of muscles against a less than maximal resistance. It's fueled by what's known as the lactate system, and we'll look at this in greater detail in the lecture covering the body's energy systems. To cut a long story short, one of the drawbacks with this route to supplying energy is the gradual buildup of lactic acid in the muscle. Now, this buildup alters the pH and creates an environment that impedes the continued contraction of the muscle cells. To prevent this, with regular exercise, your body improves the supply of oxygen by increasing the number of blood capillaries in and around the muscle, so you're able to perform longer before lactic acid takes hold. Muscular strength training, on the other hand, leads to microscopic tears to the tissues at cellular level. Ingesting sufficient protein and resting will encourage the adaptive process known as supercompensation. Now, supercompensation lays down extra contractile protein in the recovering muscles, and this, in turn, leads to an increase in the cross-sectional muscle size and a corresponding increase in strength. The degree to which muscles grow is dependent upon testosterone levels and explains the different responses between men and women with this type of training. As you've probably observed, men who lift weights generally increase muscle size, but women improve their tone and appear leaner. And this is addressed in much more detail in our lecture on muscles, so look out for that. In terms of health and health improvement, muscular endurance and strength training has been proven to increase bone density. Now, that's going to reduce the risk of osteoporosis. It'll also increase metabolic rate, so assisting in weight management, reduce blood pressure, decrease low-density lipoprotein and raise high-density lipoprotein, all good things. They also improve posture and thereby reduce the risk of lower back malady and the risk of injury from events such as falls. So that's quite a wish list, I'm sure you'll agree. What we now need to consider is how to put this info into practice. So how do we devise exercise guidelines that will lead to improved strength and/or endurance? So, no surprise, we warm up first of all, and the best way to do that is by performing basic resistance training movements, but with no resistance, just to work through a smaller range of movement. You ideally want a minimum frequency of 2 times per week, and we're looking at 1 to 3 sets of somewhere between 5 strength and 25 endurance repetitions. And the resistance may be somewhere from 50% to 90% of your 1 repetition max. So that's going to depend on your goals. We're moving the weights at slow to moderate speed. We're resting for somewhere between 30 to 60 seconds between sets. And again, that's dependent slightly upon your goals. And allowing 30 to 45 minutes for each session. As always, we'll cool down at the end with some stretches for the muscle groups worked in this session. The concepts of strength and endurance, together with specifics about weight training and the body's adaptive responses, will be addressed in that lecture on muscles, as I mentioned earlier. So far, we've covered the parameters of cardiovascular and muscular fitness. Our next parameter is flexibility or suppleness, a function we often only become aware of when we lose it following perhaps a specific injury or as we get older, although sports disciples will almost certainly notice when a lack of it affects their game day performance. Flexibility may be the most undervalued of components of fitness, even though absence of it can affect health status in a number of ways. For example, tightness in the hip flexors can actually pull on the lower part of the pelvis and it causes it to tilt. To counter this, the lower spine assumes an exaggerated curve or a lordotic position, and over time, this can cause uneven pressure on the intervertebral discs in the lumbar region and can lead to a number of health issues, most notably sciatica. As I mentioned earlier, flexibility describes the range of movement that is possible about a joint, or perhaps a number of joints. It's highly site-specific, so a flexible upper body may not necessarily be connected to a flexible lower half. In addition, flexibility is divided into static and dynamic classifications, and again, a good score in one doesn't necessarily imply the same in the other. Static flexibility involves slowly lengthening a muscle, either by natural movement or by adding external pressure at the end point and then holding this position. For example, a shoulder stretch. To stretch my shoulder here, I'll bring my arm across the chest, I'll take a hold above the elbow and I'll squeeze it in, and that's giving me a stretch above the shoulder, and I'm just going to hold that there. and we'll ease back out of it. So the muscle slowly lengthens there. Dynamic flexibility, however, refers to the range that can be achieved through movement, the muscle being continuously lengthened and shortened, but not being held at an end point. Movement must be controlled, though, because there's danger that this can become what's known as a ballistic stretch, and this carries an injury risk if it causes an overstretching of the muscle's capability. As an example, and you can join me with this again, this is a dynamic stretch for the chest. So by simply opening the arms, and I'm not doing too much because I don't want to tear my jacket, but if you get that little swing of the arms opening, what's happening is that's beginning to stretch the pectoral muscles, but it's under control, but it's not ballistic. Now, anyone who's joined a group exercise class, particularly a mind-body style class such as yoga or Pilates, will be acutely aware that we all have differing levels of flexibility. But what causes this variance? Actually, there are a number of factors. Firstly, gender differences. Sweeping generalizations, but it appears that females are more flexible than males. A Harvard University study examined the lower back area specifically, concluded that the extra flexibility was necessary to accommodate the shifting center of gravity during pregnancy. Next, although appropriate training can improve flexibility at any age, the rate of improvement is greater at a younger age. This is primarily due to the collagen in the connective tissue becoming more dense as we age, but also a reduction in cell activity within the cartilage, the ligaments and the tendons. There's also a clear link between levels of physical activity and flexibility. Something as simple as regular walking, for instance, has been proven to have a positive influence on mobility within the hips and spine. And believe it or not, the time of day can actually affect your level of flexibility due to our circadian rhythms affecting body temperature and hormonal activity. Now, improvements in your flexibility are achieved through what's referred to as a developmental stretch, a static stretch that's carefully applied and aims to lengthen the elastic muscle beyond its original length. The result is that each muscle cell that normally contains protein filaments that are overlapped begins to elongate. In addition to this, the collagen fibers within the connective tissue that surrounds the muscle start to align themselves with this direction of tension. This latter point explains why rehabilitation from muscle injury always involves stretching, as the scar tissue that forms is made up primarily of collagen fibers. The American College of Sports Medicine recommends including flexibility training 3 times per week. Now, a later lecture we have will focus entirely on the topic of stretching, together with reviewing the various techniques and the body's responses to them. The final health-related fitness component is body composition. This element is more important a measure than weight alone, as it allows us to assess the percentage of our body weight that is attributed to fat. Now, this is a valuable statistic since the medical fraternity universally agrees that excess body fat can lead to increased risk of diabetes, cardiovascular disease, joint problems, respiratory issues, and high blood pressure. Differences in body composition explain why 2 women or 2 men may be of similar weight but have totally different shapes. The tricky part to get your head around is that lean body weight, I'm talking about muscles and bones, are more dense than fat. So you could be looking at someone who's in great shape but actually weighs way more than the cuddly friend standing next to them. This principle also explains why it's possible that you commit yourself to an exercise regime, you burn fat, you look and feel great, but you're not losing any weight. In fact, you might gain weight. But if it's not body fat, if it's instead muscle, if it's healthy weight, then that can't be a bad thing. It starts to get you thinking about why so many of us have become obsessed with our weight, doesn't it? This is such a complex puzzle that later in the series we'll take time to look at this issue specifically. So what are the recommendations for percentage of body fat? The National Institutes of Health target guidelines are 20 to 21% for women, with 30% or more being classed as obese. The healthy ranges for men are between 13 and 17%, with 25% or more being considered obese. The difference between the sexes, in case you're wondering, really relates to childbearing. The percentage of fat on a woman ensures that adequate fuel is always available and affords a degree of insulation and protection. And we'll look at ways to measure body composition in my next lecture. As you can see, we need a certain degree of body fat, known as essential fat, found in the bone marrow and the organs. But it's the additional fat that we store beneath the skin, called subcutaneous fat, that presents a risk factor. Another factor that influences the degree of risk is the distribution of fat, with abdominal accumulation, i.e. What we call an apple shape, being considered more dangerous than fat around the hips and thighs, which interestingly we refer to as a pear shape. Worth bearing in mind also is the results of a study published in the International Journal of Obesity that showed that yo-yo dieting can lead to fat being stored in the tummy area rather than elsewhere. In a later lecture, we'll arm you with the knowledge to be a winner at losing weight if that's your goal. Improving your body composition is ideally achieved via a two-pronged attack. First, reduce calorie intake to create a negative energy balance so that fat stores are used as fuel. And then secondly, increase lean body mass. The first of these is achieved via suitable cardio exercise, and the latter through muscular endurance and strength training. As you'll remember from earlier, these two interventions also bring about other health benefits. So there you have it. The components of fitness lay bare, although this is not where the story ends, because history has taught us that as a society becomes more prosperous, our population fitness levels have tended to drop. So in our next lecture, we'll take a look at how to measure these various factors that are clearly affecting our well-being. In addition, as alluded to earlier, we'll take each of them out and we'll unwrap the onion and learn a little more about our bodies and how our bodies work, and crucially, how we can use this information to help us to achieve our goals and ensure that the marvelous machine that is our body functions optimally at work, at rest, and at play. You may remember the first lecture in this series enabled us to define what fitness actually means by introducing the health-related components of fitness, namely cardiovascular fitness, muscular endurance, strength, flexibility, and body composition. Individually and together, these components affect our health, our quality of life, and indeed our longevity. Dr. Pamela Douglas, a medical researcher at Duke University, has said that if you're well, how long you can exercise is more important than any other variable in determining how you will live. But what do we know about how well we are, or for how long we can exercise? It's universally acknowledged that you should see your doctor before starting a new exercise program, and I totally endorse that position. But you've probably noticed that the need for accurate assessment has spawned an entire industry of equipment and protocols within both the world of medicine and the fitness industry. You may well have undergone one or two such assessments at your local health clinic, or once your doctor has given you the all clear, at your local gym. Now, being able to record test scores for each of the fitness components is incredibly valuable. But why? Well, because doing so allows us to predict the risk of injury, in addition to giving us a benchmark to begin appropriate interventions such as exercise or diet. And we can then use these benchmarks to understand and measure the effectiveness of these interventions. So the aim of this lecture is to open the lid on this intriguing world of fitness testing, to gain an appreciation of the methods, scores, and implications. We will also show you a number of tests you can do at home, which will importantly allow you to check whether your exercise regime is moving you closer to your goals. The measurement of health-related fitness components is a fundamental step in the design and management of any exercise program, with the American College of Sports Medicine declaring that it's important for many reasons. Firstly, in educating people about their present fitness levels in relation to published norms. Assessment can also provide information that is helpful in developing a specific exercise program. Perhaps we can design a program that's devised to address certain weak areas. Also, gathering baseline and follow-up data allows for an evaluation of your progress to be made. And being able to set quantified fitness goals, i.e. improved scores, can act as a great motivator in exercise adherence. So, let's begin with cardiovascular fitness. According to an international study by Feng J. He and Graham A. McGregor, raised blood pressure is the major cause of death in the world. In most countries of the world, more than 80% of adults are at risk from their blood pressure. In the US, for instance, heart disease is the primary cause of death and disability. Now, to put these statistics into context, brace yourself for this, around every 25 seconds, a US citizen will have a heart attack. And about every minute, somebody will die from one. It's a sobering thought. Now, heart disease can result from a number of contributory factors, and these can be split into two groups: those proven to be closely associated with an increased risk, and those that are just loosely linked. So the major risk factors include family history, high blood pressure, high cholesterol level, smoking, sedentary lifestyle, and diabetes. None of those come as a surprise, I'm sure. Now, the following are suspected to be contributory factors, but their impact is not so strongly suspected. And these include things like sex, age, obesity, diet, stress, and alcohol abuse. So let's talk about blood pressure, since it's such a critical measure of cardiac health. Your resting blood pressure is a measure of the force exerted on the walls of the arteries, dependent on the amount of blood pumped and the resistance within the blood vessels. It's a valid indicator of heart health status, as readings outside the published normal ranges can be indicative of a higher risk of cardiovascular disease. Now, your blood pressure reading is made up of two components. The first is known as the systolic pressure, and this is the pressure inside your arteries as the heart is actually pumping. The second is the diastolic pressure, and this measures the pressure inside your arteries when the heart is between beats, i.e. during the relaxed phase of the cardiac cycle. Now, blood pressure is measured in millimeters of mercury, mmHg, you may have seen this. It's recorded with the systolic number first, followed by the diastolic number. So the pumping number is first, followed by the resting number. Hope that makes sense. An average reading will be somewhere in the region of 120 for the systolic and 80 for the diastolic. And readings above 140 and 90 are referred to as being moderately hypertensive and carry some degree of risk. Now, readings above 160 and 95 indicate a high degree of risk and suggest that remedial action is required. Now, the acceptable values for blood pressure may vary slightly according to different organisations, but the World Health Organization suggests the following. Your blood pressure is considered high if the systolic pressure is over 160 and the diastolic is over 95. You may hear this called stage 2 hypertension. The next stage is high normal, also called stage 1 hypertension. And for this range, the systolic is between 140 and 59, and the diastolic between 90 and 94. Normal blood pressure, usually referred to being under 140 for systolic and under 90 for diastolic. And if your blood pressure is low, the systolic is under 90 and the diastolic is under 60. Now, if it's low, that may not be a problem. It may simply be because you're working out regularly. Whilst blood pressure gives an indication of the heart's function at rest, measuring cardiovascular fitness will indicate the ability to perform dynamic movements using several muscle groups at a set intensity for a period of time. And this can provide a good indication of risk of heart disease. So, how do we measure cardiovascular fitness? The key value we search for is what's called the maximum oxygen uptake, i.e. it's your body's ability to take on board oxygen, transport it to the working muscles, and it reflects the working capacity of both the heart and the lungs, but also relies on circulation of the blood. Now, in the laboratory, this will be measured using a graded exercise test on a treadmill, whereby the intensity gradually increases, that could be the speed of the treadmill or the incline, until you can't continue, and specific breathing apparatus called a Douglas bag is used to analyse the gases you breathe in and out. Now, While this might be the most accurate way of measuring maximal oxygen uptake, it requires costly equipment and smart cookies to ensure the protocols are strictly adhered to and then to make some sense of the results. As you can imagine, exercising to complete fatigue is not the most pleasurable of experiences. Trust me, I've been there. So in gyms, the process is to test performance at a sub-maximal level and then to extrapolate the results to estimate your full-out capacity. And there are a number of ways to do this, but a cycle test is the most common method, whereby extra load or resistance is incrementally increased through applying pressure onto the wheel as you cycle. Now, those of you involved with sports teams may be familiar with the bleep test, whereby you shuttle run between usually two cones placed 20 metres apart. The idea is you run in times with the bleeps that are pre-recorded on a CD, and as the test progresses, this time between bleeps decreases, and we measure the point at which you fail to keep up with the pace. And again, this is a test to failure, so it's not ideal, nor indeed welcomed by everyone. To measure your cardiovascular fitness at home, you can try the following procedure. Now, this test requires a step of 12 inches in height. That's the highest setting on the Reebok step platform for reference. Now, you need to complete 24 steps per minute, and a metronome set at 96 beats if you have a metronome, or fitness music, if you have any, often has the speed on it. We're using an iPhone app with a metronome that helps us to set that speed. Peter's going to show you the technique now. You need to make sure that each step is up, up, and down, down. If we take one step for me, please. Let's make sure we get the whole of the foot on the board and step up. Nice and tall, we're extended through the legs, and down, staying close to the step. Now, you can change legs if you want or stay on the same lead leg. It really doesn't matter. The test lasts for just 3 minutes, after which you need to sit down quickly and locate your pulse. Now, if you have a little problem with that, have a go now before we start. Either at the radial pulse, or we can try that at the carotid, whichever works for you. Actually, you'll find after the test, it'll be beating a little bit, so it'll be easier to find, okay? So, why don't we try the test? As if by magic, let's have a metronome beating for us. Lovely. So our pace is going to be up, up, down, down, up, up, just walking. Okay, so, Peter, I'm hoping you're ready. Stopwatch at the ready, 3 minutes, and we'll begin our up, up in 4, 3, 2, let's go. Up, up, down, down, up, up, down, down. Fabulous. Let's keep that pace going. And up, up, down, down. Brilliant. Just 3 minutes. So if you lose that pace with the metronome, try to pick it back up again as quickly as possible. Down, down, up, up. Brilliant. Only 15 seconds to go. So get ready. You're going to take a quick seat at the end. You're going to find that pulse as quickly as you can. Mind your step. Nearly there. You're into the last 5 seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And hold it there. We can stop the metronome. We can stop the clock. Find that pulse for me, please. Start counting now. So I'm after just 60 seconds here. Just 60 seconds. You need to feel very carefully for that pulse. Should be easy enough to find. Halfway there now. Keep going. Keep counting. Last few seconds. And we'll stop now. And the number, please.
118.
118. Fabulous, well done. Now, 118 on our chart puts us just a little bit above average, which is because I happen to know that Peter already exercises regularly, and that's why we scored just a little bit above average there. So there you have a test to enable you to establish your cardiovascular fitness, and you can do it at home. Next, we look at muscular endurance and strength, as these are vital indicators of our ability to perform everyday activities without fatigue, and so imply the degree of independence we might retain in our later years. Also, good muscular fitness has been shown to decrease the risk of developing a number of conditions, such as low back problems and osteoporosis. Now, muscular endurance is defined as the ability of a specific muscle, or perhaps a group of muscles, to repeatedly perform an exercise. It's essential in the deeper postural muscles to enable us to maintain good postural alignment when carrying out daily tasks. Surprisingly, the two most common tests for quantifying muscular endurance that are used in the lab and on the sports field can both be tried at home, as they're based on effort in basic exercises, namely the press-up and the sit-up. The press-up test measures how many standard press-ups you can do in 1 minute, and this will give an indication of your endurance capability in the chest, the shoulders, and the arms. Here's the procedure for the press-up test. We assume a prone position on the floor with the hands about shoulder width apart, as Peter's doing now. The back straight, just a gentle curve in the lower spine, and we've got a normal natural curve in the back of the neck as well. Now, the aim of the exercise is to lower yourself down to the point where the upper arm, as Peter's doing now, is parallel to the floor, and then back up, extend, hold it there, try not to lock out the elbows at the top, okay? Now, this is the way we're going to do this. For guys, we're going to be, in the full press-up position, but for the girls, we would be on the knees with the feet lifted. It's simply, how many press-ups can we do? Take a quick rest. How many press-ups can we do consecutively? Or, if we can keep going, can we go for a minute? If so, how many? So, I'm ready with the stopwatch because I'm sure you're going to keep going for a minute. If you're ready in the position, please, Peter, and away we go. And 2, brilliant. And 3, keep the abs in tight. And 4, not too low. And up, 5, go with a nice pace. And 6, don't go crazy. And 7, you're doing well. And 8, remember I feel your pain. And 9, that's good. And 10, keep going, you're doing really well. It's 11, well done. Or I might call that one 12, but that's probably about done. Well done, fabulous, take a quick rest. Now, looking at our charts, I can tell that puts you in the, you're in the fair category. Didn't do quite as well as the cardiovascular test, but we're still in the fair category, so there's room for improvement there, but well done. The sit-up test measures how many full sit-ups you can perform in 1 minute, giving an indication of the strength, endurance strength, in the abdominal muscles and also in the hips. The procedure for this test is as follows. We assume a lying down position. The arms are crossed across the chest. The feet about a foot away from the backside, about hip width apart, so the knees are bent. Maintain that comfortable spine position. If I could just get one sit-up, please. We come up to the top, elbows touch the knees, we lower back down. Perfect example, well done, Peter. Make sure the shoulders touch the floor on the way down. Now, ideally, we're looking for how many we can do in a minute, the same as with the press-up test. But I would advise you to start at a slow pace rather than go like crazy to begin. So, shall we try? 1 minute, are we ready? And away we go. That's 1, well done, good. And up, 2, fabulous. Try to keep the feet on the floor if you can, and up. 3, well done, well done. That's 4, we're doing well. Keep going, and up. 5, that's good. And up. Remember to keep breathing while you're doing it. 7, good. Excellent. We're halfway there, keep going. Good. Keep going, try and keep those feet there, that's good. And again, working through the abs, come on, come on. Remember, it's continuous. If you need to take a stop before the minute, that's your score. And up, good. We're into the last 10 seconds. Keep going, Peter, you're doing well. Last 5. Can we get a couple more reps out there, do we think? Okay, let me take a quick look at our score. And that puts us in the average category. Sorry to call you average, but it puts us in the average category. Remember, it doesn't matter what your score is. The important point is to set yourself a benchmark so that once you start to commit to an exercise program, you can remeasure this a little later down the road and see how you're improving. In contrast to endurance, strength refers to the maximal force that can be exerted by a muscle, or indeed a group of muscles, and is not related to a time period, but it's instantaneous. In the laboratory, specific instruments known as dynamometers are used with a detailed procedure involving measurement at different joint angles. A strength can vary in the movement through a joint. A more common method, however, is that used in the gym, where the aim is to assess what's called your 1 repetition maximum for a number of exercises. Now, usually it's the bench press or the leg press, and this is quite simply a test of how much resistance you can lift just once. Now, I'm going to show you this format, although this is not something we'd use at home. Here's how the test procedure goes. Firstly, you'll warm up about 5 to 10 repetitions. It's somewhere around 50% of what we'll estimate as your maximum. Take a brief rest. Increase the load to somewhere between 60 to 80% of your estimated maximum, just to do 3 to 5 repetitions. This will ensure we're warmed up, primed and ready to go. Now begin to add small amounts of weight and then lift until we arrive at a load where we can only lift once. So ideally, we're going to add the weight on the end, take a rest and then lift. Do the same again, but in 3 to 5 attempts, try and get to that point where we reach your 1 repetition maximum. But again, since this requires a good skill level, heavy resistance equipment, and ideally spotters, people who are there to help you lift the weight when you reach your failure level, it's not really appropriate for home application. But now you know what to expect if you go to the gym to do a strength test. The next measure of health-related fitness is that of flexibility, which is the ability to move a joint through its full range of movement. As we learnt in our first lecture, not only is this of value in sports performance, but also of importance in carrying out everyday activities, particularly because reduced flexibility can lead to decreased functional capability and possibly bad posture, and that is a precursor of chronic musculoskeletal injury. So just to remind ourselves, flexibility is specific to each joint, which makes the art of measuring it, something known as goniometry, quite a difficult process, with no single test being sufficient. However, that said, the sit and reach test is the most common procedure, as it measures flexibility in the hamstrings and the lower back. Now, since 4 out of 5 of us suffer from lower back trouble at some time in our lives, it's worth conducting this test as a valid measure of our health-related fitness. This test requires use of a sit and reach box and a procedure as follows. We'll gently warm up prior to the test, practicing a few preparatory stretches and movements for the lower back and the hamstring. Types of things like a little leg curl would work, a little rotation through the lower spine. A couple of minutes of that will get us nicely warmed up. We'll sit on the floor, place the feet flat against the box, extend the legs until the knees are sort of straight, and then we lean forwards to push the bar as far forwards as we can with the fingertips. The hands should ideally be overlapped, and that'll make sure that we're not rotating the hips and we're pushing evenly. To help perform the test, take a deep breath beforehand and then exhale as you bend forwards, making sure you don't bounce to try and get the highest score. Now, the good news is that we can mimic this test at home, simply, as Peter's doing now, by sitting on the floor. I'm using a bit of tape here to measure where I'm putting the heels. Yeah? The legs are outstretched, and I'm simply using a tape measure, placed on the floor to assess how far short of, which would be a minus score, or beyond the line of the heels we go. Okay? Simple to measure the results. So shall we have a little go? We cross those fingers over, take a deep breath in first, and then begin to gently bend forwards, reaching the hands forwards. Let's take a look. Fabulous. And that's a score of -2, and relax just there. And -2 puts us in, you'll be pleased to know, in the average category. You may remember our final health-related fitness component is body composition. This is an important indicator of general health, as the risks associated with being overweight are numerous. They include an increased risk of developing coronary heart disease, hypertension, type 2 diabetes, osteoarthritis, and possibly even certain cancers. In the clinical environment, measuring procedures are quite involved but prefer a good degree of accuracy. And these include, firstly, hydrostatic or underwater weighing. And this works on the basis that fat, being less dense than lean body tissue, such as muscle and bone, is more buoyant, allowing a comparison of dry land and underwater weights to be used in calculating what are fairly accurate percentages attributed to each. A second method is dual energy X-ray absorptiometry. And this is a very accurate method of measuring body composition, involving passing two types of X-ray through the body and a special scanner which is able to differentiate between fat, bone and muscle tissue. Another method is near-infrared interactance, and this uses a device that shines an infrared beam on the front of the arm, with the amount of light bouncing back from the bone measured as an indication of the amount of fat present. Now, it has the advantages of being fairly inexpensive and easy to use, but it's not as accurate as the previous two methods. Now, in the gym, however, you're more likely to encounter the following methods of body composition evaluation. The first, skin fold calipers. Now, using these skin fold calipers, we take measurements at the waist, the back, and the front and rear of the upper arm. Now, within the fitness industry, this is used to generate surprisingly accurate results. More importantly, they're repetitive. So readings from the four sites are added together and tables give an equivalent body fat percentage for these sums. A second method is bioelectrical impedance. This estimates body fat and involves passing a small electric current through the body and measuring the resistance to its flow. Lean tissue conducts electricity better than fat, so this is the scientific basis behind the method. So resistance to the flow of the current can be used to predict the level of body fat. The Bodystat, Tanita, Omron, these are all machines that use this technique. Now, fortunately, these are two procedures you can do easily at home. A technique you can use at home is the waist to hips ratio. Important because people with more abdominal fat than those who have the same percentage of fat but more evenly spread around the body are at an increased risk of premature death. So the following procedures should be used to measure this statistic. So, first of all, we're going to take the circumference around the abdomen. So the idea here is to get the tape measure around you in line with the belly button, yeah? The point of that is it gives you a reference for next time, because when you come to measure it in future, the navel will be in exactly the same place. Make sure the tape is straight. Now, ideally you will measure this undressed, but if you are doing it with clothing on, make a note of clothing. If you're wearing thick clothing, you need to know that for next time. Okay? What was the score there, Peter? We then take the hip measurement, and what we're looking for here is to find, quite simply, the widest point on the hips. So you might need to move it up or down a couple of times to find that. And again, make sure, and this is where a mirror is very useful, that the tape measure is straight. Okay, so the score is... Oh, fabulous. Now, all we do then to calculate the score is divide the waist measurement by the hip measurement. Now, a score of greater than 0.94 for men and 0.82 for women is indicative of a significantly increased risk of health issues. And we actually came in at 0.92, so that's a healthy score you'll be pleased to know. In summary then, we now know that fitness can be divided into two categories, namely skill-related components and the more important health-related components, which are cardiovascular fitness, muscular endurance, strength, flexibility, and body composition. What we have discovered here is that there is a battery of tests that can be used to measure these indicators from which we can predict risk of lifestyle disease and, more crucially, decide upon suitable tactics to improve scores in these vital parameters. So rather than fumbling in the dark, dietary and particularly exercise advice can be prescribed precisely once these values are established to ensure you're always moving closer to your health and fitness goals. If you're concerned about your current health status or have already taken the decision to begin an exercise regime, then these tests are the perfect starting point. And since I've shown you ways to do this at home, there's nothing to stop you getting started today. Remember, the long journey to fitness begins with a single step. And that first step should definitely be to set your benchmarks with these tests. And then you can monitor your progress on that successful journey. Despite there being libraries full of research material that confirms that regular exercise brings a whole smorgasbord of benefits, statistics from the US Department of Health and Human Sciences reveal that only around 35% of adults engage in regular physical activity, and around 25% admit to doing none at all. So what is it that prevents people from taking a dose of medicine that's clearly good for them? Now, to uncover the reasons, we need to dig deep to appreciate the psychology of fitness. So this presentation will establish some basic facts regarding attitudes to exercise, the thought process that leads to action and tips you into making the decision to pursue a more active lifestyle. A UK study revealed that sedentary people hold fairly negative perceptions of exercise, feeling that it's difficult, unpleasant, maybe even pointless. It was suggested that this was primarily influenced by their experiences of physical education and sports participation at school. Sadly, when these people were asked to discuss exercise, they were happy to declare their goals, but they also offered the difficulties they anticipated, effectively immediately putting up barriers to change. Now, to get some insights into why this is, let's visit our first subject matter expert, Jason Satterfield, Professor of Clinical Medicine and Director of Behavioral Medicine at the University of California in San Francisco. Now, I asked Professor Satterfield, what are some of the physiological barriers that prevent people from embracing a healthier lifestyle? And for some insights into how can we overcome them?
In general, we're sort of wired to appreciate things that happen relatively soon rather than relatively late. For something like exercise, that punishment comes up front, and the reward isn't until many months, maybe even many years down the road. So it's almost as if the reward structure needs to be reversed so that you get that reward up front so that it reinforces that behavior and you want to do it again. The next thing that comes to mind is that we oftentimes as medical providers forget about the complexities of life. And it's a funny thing because we're humans too and we have complex lives too, but we'll give a patient what we think is an attainable goal without realizing the amount of work stress, the amount of family stress, that there are actually 3 or 4 other behavioral changes that they're trying to do at exactly the same time, the financial stress, this complicated calculus of life that we often don't take into account as we're working through a behavior change program. So we want to know not just is it the patient's goals, are they attainable goals, are there immediate rewards, does it fit into their life right now, and is it sufficiently high enough priority that they'll be able to engage and they'll be able to succeed. There are a lot of stories and there's a lot of suggestions. The controlled studies that have been done using incentives, they typically use a monetary incentive. So a person, each time they go to the gym, each time they put in a certain number of minutes on a treadmill, they will get a monetary reward, either immediately or it's put in a bank so that they can see that amount that's growing and growing and growing. In fact, they've used that for a lot of different preventive health behaviors. Do you get your vaccinations? Do you get your mammogram? Do you get your colonoscopy? And essentially, paying people to do things that are good for them works. So those incentives actually do work, as funny as that might feel.
As you can see, one method of successfully overcoming obstacles is to motivate people by helping them to understand the many benefits of exercise and then to balance them against the negatives so the value of adopting a healthy lifestyle becomes apparent. Once the advantages of change are recognized, we're all able to develop a realistic plan of action that will remove those barriers. Let's look more specifically at what are the barriers and how they rate under separate classifications, from the most important first, and also their components, being listed in descending order of their score. Now, the biggest barrier is time. People say they don't have time, no time because of work, young children to look after. Secondly, there are emotional factors. I'm not the sporty type, I'm too shy, I might even get injured. What about motivation? I need to rest in my spare time, surely, or I don't have the energy, or I probably won't keep it up, so no point in starting. Another point is access. I've got nobody to do it with. It's a bit expensive. There are no suitable local facilities. I've not got the right clothes or equipment. And then perhaps physical injury or disability. Does that prevent you? Maybe I'm too fat. Maybe I'm not healthy enough to even participate. Maybe I'm too old. Now, these previously mentioned points don't tell the whole story, however, as men and women also rate barriers slightly differently. So there's a gender factor at play here. For example, women are much less likely to participate in sport, considering themselves to not be the sporty type. So walking, cycling, group exercise classes might be the better starting modes. Women are twice as likely as men to cite their career role, so home exercise equipment and workout DVDs are an ideal answer here. Work pressures were given as a reason by more men than women, so finding a way to build exercise into the daily routine is a solution, and we'll talk more about this later. Injury problems tend to affect men more than women and older more than younger. So a tactic here is to move away from high-intensity sports to more moderate options, so maintaining a competitive outlet but reducing the taxing effects of wear and tear on the body. Now, the idea of joining a gym presents specific concerns and worries for some people, but these can be listed and countered as follows. Complicated exercises. Well, you could easily request your instructor designs a workout using the most basic movements to start with. Ensure you work slowly to begin with, allowing you to master technique and reducing the risk of injury to the muscles, joints and connective tissue. Unusual activities. A common sense approach is stick with what you know. At the start, it makes sense to do what you're comfortable with, as there'll be plenty of time to get a little more adventurous later. Doing too much too soon. Now, a good instructor should guide you on this point, but you can help by taking responsibility for yourself, ensuring you begin at a comfortable speed, a comfortable resistance, whatever it is, and also allow for gradual progression. And this progression can be in the number of visits, the duration of your workout, the intensity of the exercise you're actually doing. Technical equipment can be a barrier. Now, most cardio stations include a quick start option, and the instructors are there to help you. So if you forget what you were shown in your first induction, don't be afraid to ask them. Being unable to monitor your pulse can sometimes be tricky, as this is required often for us to work out at the right intensity. Now, this isn't so easy when you're moving on the cardio machine, so opt for an alternative method of judging your workout. A rate of perceived exertion is one such method, and again, your instructor will explain this simple system to you. Now, studies have shown us that not just regular exercise, but even a single session can lead to improved feelings of well-being. We're talking here about improved self-esteem, increased productivity at work, enhanced self-image, better confidence. Don't we all want that? Now, the third item in this list that's key to taking up exercise is how people view themselves. This is often based on previous history, and it's a hard one to influence. Even if the doctor has proposed exercise to aid the treatment plan for a particular medical condition, if someone feels incompetent, this can be a detractor. But a little more about this later. Now, a startling fact is that despite the evolutionary improvements in technology, and as an indirect result, therefore, a general increase in our standards of living, mental illness has grown and continues to do so, with an estimated 17% of adults suffering major depression at some point in their lives. While stress management techniques, psychotherapy and drugs are common prescriptions, as we discuss in our separate presentations on this topic, exercise can be shown to be a strong solution. So let's go back to Professor Satterfield to understand the clinical research behind the link between physical exercise and cognitive function.
We know if a person engages in regular aerobic activity, there are two chemicals that are released that help us to understand why their cognitive function improves and also why their mood improves in the case of depression. Now, the two chemicals we're talking about, the first is BDNF, or brain-derived neurotrophic factors, essentially fertilizers for our neurons that help them to grow. They grow new branches, they grow more interconnections, improving cognitive functioning. The second is maybe on a little more sort of practical and obvious level. As we become more physically fit, as we have more cardiorespiratory fitness, our circulation improves. As your circulation improves, more energy, more oxygen can move to the brain. But the second chemical that's released is something called VEGF, which is vasal endothelial growth factor, fertilizer for arteries and veins. It just helps us to grow new vessels that are going to carry that blood supply to our brain. So if you're taking better care of your brain, you're growing your neurons, you're feeding it better with oxygen and nutrients, you're going to have better cognitive function, you're going to have a better mood.
Let's look at what else exercise is doing for our mental state. Exercise stimulates positive thoughts and feelings that balance negative moods and leads to improved self-esteem. This in turn affects our performance at work and relationships. Mastering new skills leads to improved confidence, and physical activity gives lots of opportunities for this, helping to promote a more positive outlook. Now, there is a school of thought that believes exercise itself might not be the treatment, but acts as a distraction from the causes of anxiety, acting in the same way as meditation. Shared pleasure is known to boost mood state, and physical activity can be a route to forming new friendships that result in more positive feelings about life in general. Irrespective of the precise mechanism behind the link between exercise and good mental health, the key is to shift towards changing behavior and then making efforts to maintain those changes. The difficulty here is that behavior change very rarely arises from a momentary decision, but it's a process of different stages. Firstly, pre-contemplation, the idea of considering starting an exercise program, say during the next 6 months. Then contemplation, which is seriously considering starting an exercise program within the next 6 months. We then move to preparation. We're going to begin exercising within the next 60 days. This hopefully then leads to action the first 6 months of following an exercise program. Then maintenance, sustaining that exercise program for longer than 6 months. We need to be aware of relapse, which is whereby we return to the previous stage, but that doesn't stop us moving forwards. And then finally, hopefully, we arrive at termination, which is the successful consolidation of the behavior into our regular lifestyle. Now, moving through the early stages is very much a thought process, whilst making progress in the latter stages relies on action. The thought process may be stimulated by reading an article in the newspaper about the risk of heart disease being associated with lack of exercise, or perhaps struggling to play with the kids without sitting down, puffing and panting. The point is, there's usually a trigger, and this is supported by a fact that 83% of those on the National Weight Control Registry reported that one single event acted as a stimulation for change. This could lead to unhappiness, being unfit, and maybe even imagining how things could be different. As that snowball begins to roll, it's possible these result in a conscious effort to seek out gyms and/or sports clubs in the local area. Now, moving into action, the next stage is commonly to make an appointment to join a gym and to inform family and friends of the new commitment. Taking this interaction further, planning to exercise with a friend or booking a personal trainer are examples of the next step, and with confidence growing, independent efforts such as regularly walking the dog or doing a spot of gardening at weekends might follow. Rewards for your achievement should come next, as they're shown to assist adherence, and the final stage is reached when tactics are developed to avoid problem situations. For example, recording television programs to allow attendance at certain exercise classes. Now, to move through the stages, a decision has to be made based on comparing pros and cons, or more laterally, the desire to move away from pain and closer to pleasure. Clearly then, if a person is struggling to make the move to the next level, external encouragement could be all that is required to tip the scale and avoid the risk of relapse, whereby we drop back to the previous stage. Unfortunately, as we've already discussed, there are a number of reasons that can prevent us from making this journey from thought to action, and these key issues being as follows. Lack of time. I often hear that people work late and then they don't want to exercise because they've been told that it's bad to exercise before bed. But that's their only time, so they're stuck in a rut of not exercising. But is this even true? I asked one of America's experts in sleep, Craig Heller, Professor of Biology and Human Biology at Stanford University, if it's a myth or a fact that you shouldn't exercise before sleeping. Here's what he had to say.
You can definitely exercise before going to bed and still have good sleep. There is a myth that's associated with exercise before sleep. It's not only a myth, it's actually a bullet point in a brochure put out by the American Academy of Sleep Medicine that one of the pieces of advice for improving your sleep is avoid exercise within something, I think it's 3 hours of bedtime. What's wrong? Because we know that exercise, mild exercise, promotes a rise in temperature. The rise in temperature promotes good sleep. Okay? So where does the myth come from? The myth comes from thinking of intense exercise that involves emotionality, such as competitive sports. So if you are on an ice hockey team and you have your rink time at 11 p.m. and you have a terribly aggressive game, you're not going to have good sleep following that. But it's not because of the exercise per se, it's because that it involved activation of your sympathetic nervous system, all of the emotionality and the fight or flight responses that are the result of a competitive sport.
Well, I guess it looks as if that excuse is out of the window. Now, as we mentioned earlier, overcoming these barriers usually relies upon a trigger, although this will be more powerful if followed by the setting of clearly defined goals. Now, in order to help you achieve the results you desire, you should use the SMART system. Now, I'm aware some of you will have heard of this, maybe used it before, but let's look at it in a little more detail. A SMART goal satisfies the following components. It needs to be something specific. We need to be able to measure it. It's got to be achievable, realistic, and timed. So let's look at that in a little bit more detail. What precisely do you want to achieve? The more specific the goal, the more powerful a tool it is in motivating us. Is it to run a 5K race, to look great for a wedding, or simply shape up for the beach? These are all examples. It needs to be measurable. By recording weight and circumference measurements, then comparing these after 6 weeks, for example, you can begin to quantify the positive change. Now, a goal needs to be achievable, and some would argue that, well, you can achieve virtually anything you set your mind to. However, if you bear in mind your current fitness level, your previous exercise experience and the resources available to you, this will put it into a much better context. Our goals need to be realistic. Now, this is similar to achievable, but focuses a little more on the general reality. Whilst it may be possible to make significant positive changes to your well-being, altering your genetic makeup and dreaming of a career as a ballet dancer must be avoided. I would also add that if you like it, you'll do it, and if you hate it, you won't. The final and most important factor is time. Unless you build time parameters into the goals, you could perhaps procrastinate and end up being more frustrated and less focused than when you started. Now, the actual choice of goal is vitally important. It becomes that motivating force. It becomes the difference between success and failure. So what sort of goals do people normally select? Let's have a look. Now, top of our list is to feel in good shape physically, both men and women scoring that very highly. Slightly lower down, surprisingly, is the sense of achievement. Getting outside, obviously, is a motivating factor, but let's look at maintaining or losing weight. And surprisingly, there's quite a gender difference there. And it's nice to see that having fun rates in that list of important factors. I'm sure most of these will come as no surprise and score highly on that sample population who responded to that survey. The most important point to learn here is that there exists a myriad of desired outcomes that can provide motivation for you to begin and adhere to an exercise program. So don't narrow your vision when choosing your goals. Another piece of useful advice is to write down the outcome, but then support it by adding one line stating what it will mean to you and how it will change things for you. Now, there are two crucial things to consider here. If you're at the point of thinking about beginning a new exercise regime, or indeed you've taken the plunge recently, firstly, you'll remember when we discussed the stages of change earlier, we mentioned relapse. Since, let's be honest, this is almost inevitable, it makes sense to plan for it so it doesn't grow from a simple relapse into a major collapse. Common sense dictates that there's always the chance that illness, work deadlines, family commitments, holidays may, both unexpectedly and sometimes expectedly even, throw your program off the rails. Accept that they happen. Don't beat yourself up about it. Reflect upon the positive notion that you've already made changes and started some way down the road to a new you, and then just move on. You can't stop the festive season, but a little forethought and getting straight back to your program after will ensure that damage limitation is minor. Secondly, perhaps singularly the most vital concept to grasp on this topic is self-responsibility. A fitness instructor can design the perfect routine. Family and friends can give you support, but the truth is that nobody else will do it for you. This is why it's so valuable to have your goals written down and clearly defined. When you feel enthusiasm beginning to drain, read these again and take a quiet moment to yourself. Just try to imagine how you'll feel when you achieve those goals, what those around you might say, because these are what make the short-term effort worthwhile. Perhaps one of the easiest routes to building a healthy lifestyle is to try to find ways to introduce exercise into your daily routine, as this helps to overcome nearly all of the previously mentioned barriers. Now, the good news is that non-exercise activity thermogenesis, as the scientists refer to it, was shown in a 2005 study to amount to an energy expenditure of around 350 calories a day, which is in line with what you'd expect from most moderate intensity exercise classes. Now, any kind of activity counts. Mopping the floor, washing the car, even fidgeting actually helps. And there are cumulative benefits. So, let's consider a few options, a few things you could try. What about walking briskly around the shopping mall, ensuring you cover the whole footprint prior to stopping to take a look in any shop windows or make any purchase? And in addition, always take the stairs instead of the elevator. What about forgetting the automatic car wash? Wash the car yourself. You can do it just as well, and you'll be burning calories at the same time. What about taking the dog for more frequent walks? What you could also do is aim to gradually increase the distance you cover in the same period of time. Almost becomes a measure of our improving fitness as well. If you're confined to a desk all day, you could still give your waistline a good workout. Think of this. If you're sitting upright with a long neck and shoulder blades back, if you sit on the edge of your chair and hold on to the sides, and then simply lifting the knees up towards your chest, both together, is a really effective way of working the abdominals. Could you do that next time you're sat at your desk? You might want to check nobody's looking while you do it. What about trying to find new ways to play actively with the kids? From football to frisbee, hopscotch to hide and seek, you can make a serious difference to both your energy levels and your relationship with the kids with just investing this little bit of quality time. How much time do you spend on hold during telephone calls? This frustrates me. But could you, while you're holding on that call, be doing some squats? Maybe. Could we be doing some leg lifts to the side, working into the hips and thighs? Maybe even better still, to the rear, working into the buttocks. So next time you're parked on switchboard, I'll expect you to be doing a couple of those exercises. Dance is a great way to get fit. So what about taking dance lessons with a friend? Or better still, simply move the coffee table out of the center of the lounge, turn the music up loud and go with the flow. It's often said, but it works. Could we leave the car at home just for one little errand? Do we sometimes use the car when we could walk just as well? And then what about getting busy in the garden? It's a good workout, so why not plant something soon? Who knows, you might even end up eating the fruits of your labours. What about if we're office bound? Is it possible to go and talk face to face? Do we have to rely on phones and emails to talk to our colleagues? And also, while you're there, if you're doing any photocopying, a great exercise you can do is to simply move your feet a little further back from the copier, put your hands on the side, and a couple of little press-ups will tone the chest, shoulders, and arms. Simple exercise. No excuses. And then what about what I call supermarket aerobics? How quickly can you do the grocery shopping? Now, The trick is you need to ensure you go up and down every aisle, even if you don't need anything in those particular sections. And better still, pack your own bags, carry them to the car yourself. If you must use the trolley for this, take the trolley back to the store rather than leaving it at the collection point in the car park. Now, a tactic I've used myself: museums. They're fabulous places. Take the kids to the museum, particularly if the weather's miserable. They tend to be large, the kids learn a little bit, and you can lose a few pounds in covering the distance. And the TV. Now, the dreaded ad breaks. There are always going to be ad breaks, but why don't we use that time? What about every time there's an ad break, we decide to jog on the spot to relieve the boredom? What about we hit the floor and do some crunches? Either way, it's going to keep your metabolic rate up high. Of course, having embarked upon a fitness program, it's still a tough job to maintain it, with research published in the International Journal of Sport and Exercise Physiology showing that around 50% of people who begin exercise drop out within the first 6 months. So what actually motivates people to begin exercise, and more importantly, what keeps them at it? One of the primary motivators to get off the sofa, so to speak, is the concept of future aspiration, by which I mean the desire to be independent in later years or to remain distanced from ill health. This needs to be supported by consistent messages regarding the efficacy of exercise as a route to achieving these goals, together with support from important family members and friends. And the great thing is, this mix becomes a potent cocktail that results in a person's improved sense of ability to take up and succeed at maintaining an exercise routine. Once there is the belief that exercise will make a difference and the self-confidence that it can be done, a specific plan of action will move from thought to reality. And that's exactly where we're taking you in this series. As mentioned, a lot of people fall off an exercise plan very early. So let's take a look at what are the major factors that affect exercise adherence. Believe it or not, men are generally more likely to remain active than women. It's also suggested there's a higher incidence of dropout in the overweight. Now, success is a vital commodity, as the feeling of proficiency at exercise is a key. So, as we mentioned earlier, exercises should always be achievable, never do too much too soon, start out easy. Feeling healthier and improvements in your quality of life are significant factors, but can take a while to manifest. So regular assessments of some form are valuable in providing confirmation that workout endeavours are bearing fruit. So that takes you back to our last lecture on assessing fitness. An instructor or personal trainer who provides knowledge and who helps to set goals is a vital tool. A social element can make a big difference. So studio classes, small group personal training that has become popular in recent years are advised. Believe it or not, even just watching other people exercise has been shown to have benefit. Unsurprisingly, easy access to and feeling comfortable in suitable facilities is important. So shop around when choosing a gym. Having direction has been shown to be very useful. So any attempt to embark upon an exercise regime should begin with devoting some time to setting those SMART goals. So in summary then, bearing in mind that pre-warned is pre-armed, here's a list of tips to help overcome specific barriers. And this is provided by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. You can use this, you can pass it on to a relative or friend when the desire to begin or to continue to exercise begins to wane. Now, I've adjusted it a little bit so it doesn't repeat what we've covered earlier. But let's take a look at these points. So lack of time, I know I keep picking on this one, but it's always listed as the biggest preventative factor in getting into exercise. So what could we do? Could we identify available time slots, monitor your daily activities for a week? Identify at least 3 30-minute slots you could use for physical activity, and trust me, they'll be there. What about 6 15-minute slots instead, which is still going to impact your life significantly? Could you add physical activity to your daily routine, as we've just talked about? Could you select activities that require minimal time, walking, jogging, stair climbing? Social influences. Explain your interest in physical activity to friends and family. Ask them to support your efforts. Invite friends and family members to join you for exercise. Could you plan social activities that involve exercise? Could we all meet up at the park, perhaps? Develop new friendships with physically active people. Join a group, such as the YMCA or a hiking club. Another barrier is travel. If we're on the move, that can sometimes put a block to us exercising. What about putting a jump rope in your suitcase and using it between meetings? What about walking the halls, climbing the stairs? In fact, stair running now in big office blocks has become a competitive event. You could do this in hotels. Could you pick hotels that have swimming pools or exercise facilities? I know I do. Could you join gyms with a reciprocal membership agreement so that when you're in a different town, you can still work out at the club? Could you visit the local shopping mall and walk for half an hour or more? Bring your MP3 player even, and your favourite aerobic music to keep you moving. Finally, what about your retirement years? Is this a time to slow down? No. Let's look upon retirement as an opportunity to become more active instead of less. Could we spend more time gardening? We've got more time to walk the dog, to play with the grandchildren. We could even learn a new skill. This brings me back to dancing, ballroom dancing, square dancing, swimming. You're never too old to learn to swim. Now that you have the time, you could make regular physical activity a part of every day. Go for a walk every morning or every evening before dinner. Treat yourself to an exercise bike and ride every day while you're reading your favourite book or magazine. So there you have it. A list of tips, and there are plenty more in your guidebook, so take a look at that. But my parting thought is, to coin a well-used phrase, they say there's no time like the present. So, what are you waiting for? Let me begin with a riddle for you. What is it I'm talking about? They say you can give it away. You can apparently wear it on your sleeve, and you can even sing with all of it. You can choose to keep things close to it, which is not surprising since it's reported to have its own affairs. And to be courageous, you need to borrow one from a lion. Without doubt, it can be broken, but as the epic, award-winning movie Titanic proved, it will go on. But how much do you really know about your heart? Over the next 30 minutes, I hope to teach you a few interesting new facts about this most vital of vital organs. We'll explore the amazing tandem working relationship between the heart and lungs, and we'll uncover where it can sometimes go wrong. Along the way, I'll propose a range of exercise modes to help you to maximise its health and efficiency. So why don't we start literally at the heart of the matter with some statistics and facts. The average human heart weighs around 11 ounces, beats around 100,000 times each day, resulting in approximately 2,000 gallons of blood being moved through 60,000 miles of blood vessels, it gets better, reaching almost 75 trillion cells. Now, because the heart has its own electrical impulse, it can actually survive outside the body as long as it has a supply of oxygen. Strange thought. The sound of the heartbeat is actually generated by the opening and closing of the 4 valves that ensure blood constantly flows and that it's always flowing in the right direction. It's thought that some ancient civilizations believed the heart and other organs actually moved around the body of their own free will. Interesting thought. And the term heartfelt, believe it or not, is attributed to the great philosopher Aristotle, who reasoned that the heart received input from peripheral organs, and this directed thoughts and actions. He also suggested that it was a source of heat. And the stethoscope, an instrument we're all familiar with, was invented by a French doctor, René Laennec, in the early 1800s, who actually felt it was inappropriate to monitor the heartbeat of his female patients by pressing his ear against their breasts. I can see what he means. Now, considering it performs such a key role in sustaining life, the heart is quite a simple design. It just pumps blood around the body. Sits beneath and just to the left of the breastbone. It's a little larger than the size of a tennis ball, and is enclosed in a double-lined sheath called the pericardium. The heart muscle itself, the myocardium, is divided into chambers separated by a smooth membrane. And these chambers sit neatly, two on top of each other and side by side. The upper ones being known as atria, and they receive blood from where it's passed to the lower ones, these lower chambers being called ventricles. They're larger and cone-shaped to help the blood to flow out from the bottom. Clearly, they're stacked on top of each other so that gravity can assist in blood flowing from the upper to the lower chambers. Now, blood first enters into the right atrium from three key veins, namely the superior and inferior vena cava, which bring in blood from the upper and the lower body respectively, plus also the coronary sinus that brings blood being used by the heart muscle to actually do its work. Now, since this is blood that's returning from the body, it's already given up its oxygen to the various cells to be used as energy in a huge number of metabolic processes. So it's low in oxygen concentration but high in carbon dioxide, which is the waste product that has to be removed from the tissues. Blood drains down to the right ventricle from where it is pumped to the lungs via the pulmonary artery that en route divides into two legs to serve each of the lungs. Having made its journey to the lungs, the oxygenated blood returns to the heart by entering the left atrium from where it is shifted to the left ventricle. Then it's ready to be pumped through the aorta to the rest of the body. The ventricles are essentially just muscular pumps to circulate blood to all the tissues. So you'll appreciate then that the right ventricle pumps blood only a short distance to the lungs, whereas the left ventricle needs to generate enough pressure to ensure blood flow reaches all the extremities. For this reason, the left ventricle is larger and the muscle walls tend to be thicker when compared to the right side. Now, a temporary break in blood flow could be potentially catastrophic. So the heart valves ensure that blood is always moving, and most importantly, always moving in the right direction. This is a strict one-way system with blood flowing from the right atrium to the ventricle below via what's called the tricuspid valve. Whereas on the left side, the blood moves from the upper to the lower chamber through the mitral valve. When blood flows into the atria, the valves are loose and open. But when the heart muscle contracts to pump blood out through the ventricles, they're pushed upwards, so effectively closing off the atria and preventing the blood from flowing backwards. Now, in addition, there are semilunar valves at the exits of the two ventricles to both the pulmonary artery and the aorta. These remain closed while the ventricles fill up, preventing that backflow from the arteries. They then open on contraction of the heart muscle simultaneously with the tricuspid and mitral valves closing. In fact, it is this opening and closing of the valves that creates the lub-dub sound that's picked up by the stethoscope, or the bare ear, before the ingenious Frenchman we mentioned earlier came along with his stethoscope. Now, this lub-dub sound is the reason any defect can be detected, such as stenosis, whereby the valves become infected. We then get that irregular sound from the heart. The duration of one heartbeat, together with the rest period that immediately follows it, is referred to as one cardiac cycle, and this can be listed in distinct stages. First of all, let's take the heart muscle at rest. That's how it is to begin with, and pressure builds up in the atria as blood flows into them. As the pressure increases, the valves open to the ventricles and blood shifts to there. The ventricles are relaxed and their semilunar valves are closed due to the pressure from blood within the arteries being greater than in the ventricles. This is the relaxed stage of the cycle. The pressure in the blood vessels is at its lowest. This stage is known as the diastole and usually in the region of about 80 millimeters of mercury as it's measured. An electrical message then stimulates the heart muscle to contract in the atria. This pushes blood into the ventricles that are still relaxed at this stage. The signal to contract now reaches the ventricle heart muscles, and so they contract, and this causes the pressure in the chambers to increase. When the pressure is great enough, i.e. higher than those in the pulmonary artery and the aorta, blood is ejected with some force. And this stage is known as the systole, when the pressure on the heart walls is at its peak. And commonly, compared to the diastole at around 80 millimeters of mercury, this will be about 120, so a much higher pressure. Once the ventricles are empty, the heart muscle relaxes, the tricuspid and mitral valves now close. Simultaneously, the blood begins to flow into the atria, and so the whole cycle begins all over again. Now, incredibly, all of this takes place in around 0.8 seconds. Doesn't take long, does it? Now, this cycle can be monitored by an electrocardiograph that detects the electrical stimuli that bring about the heart muscle contractions. The whole cycle is divided into separate instants. The P wave being when the atria contract, the QRS wave being the label for the ventricles contracting and the rest time in the ventricles referred to as the T wave. So we have these three separate waves that we can see in graph form. Now, heart problems can be identified through this method via a disruption in the cycle, as the pattern will change if the heart doesn't receive adequate supply of oxygen, a condition known as angina, for example. Now, when we take our pulse, usually at the radial or at the carotid arteries, we're actually measuring the number of cycles in a set period. So although 72 beats per minute is generally accepted as the average, it's fair to say that fitter individuals tend to have pulses around 60. Elite athletes, in some cases, can even have pulses as low as 30. Those of you who remember tennis in the 70s may remember Bjorn Borg, who was referred to quite often as the Ice Borg, being so cool and calm. Although since his great nemesis at the time was John McEnroe, anybody would appear calm compared to him. But he reputedly had a pulse rate down near 30 when at rest. Now, this adaptation as a result of the heart becoming stronger with regular exercise is because the heart becomes able to pump more blood with each contraction. And this quantity of blood is known as the stroke volume. Now, more blood with each beat, therefore, means that the number of beats can be lower. And so the heart doesn't need to work quite as hard, and therefore it's likely to last us a little bit longer than one that's constantly under stress. The heart muscle itself, as with every other muscle in the body, requires oxygen to function. And this is supplied by the coronary arteries. Now, clearly, if these become blocked, even just partially, the heart muscle will be deprived of blood that brings vital fuel, and so it'll cause us problems. A partial disruption is what's referred to as a myocardial ischemia, leading to angina, with a complete blockage being a myocardial infarction, or, as most of us will know it, a heart attack. Now, since the key here is the supply of oxygen to the heart muscle, obviously a lower concentration of it in the blood supply will also be an issue, as in cases of hemoglobin deficiencies caused by perhaps smoking, lack of iron in the diet, and some other pathologies can cause this. Unfortunately, things do sometimes go wrong, as you would expect with any machine, even the human machine, as the following statistics will support. There is, on average, one death every 37 seconds due to cardiovascular disease in the US alone, with an estimated 20% of these being due solely to coronary artery issues. And these statistics are supported in European countries as well. 1 in every 18 deaths in America is due to stroke. And a 2005 study showed that the number one leading cause of death in women aged 65 is heart disease, a result that was repeated in a 2010 study of the male population. Now, disappointingly, despite the wealth of research that proves exercise leads to a healthier heart, and the number of messages that are put into the public domain by various authorities, still around 60% of Americans lead what is termed a sedentary lifestyle. We'll talk later a little more specifically about the type of exercise and how to make sure you don't become another one of these statistics. So let's take a moment to consider this essential transport system, the blood vessels that take oxygen to wherever it's required in the body. We've already seen that blood is ejected from the heart into the arteries with some force, so you can guess they have to have a fairly elastic structure. Their walls need to be able to stretch. Now this is important as it's the recoil after they've expanded that actually causes a squeezing effect that moves blood through the network. As mentioned earlier, the primary artery is the aorta that leaves the heart and divides up into many sections, one of the most important being the coronary arteries. The aorta then heads upwards into the thoracic cavity just a few centimetres before taking a swift U-turn and dropping down behind the heart, and at the top of this arch is where the carotid arteries will branch off that go up towards, head towards the brain. Now, when the arteries reach the parts of the body they serve, they actually split into smaller vessels with thinner walls called arterioles. They then split again into even smaller capillaries. Being so small allows the vessels to get as close as possible to the tissues they serve and allows them to deliver oxygen as well as removing carbon dioxide. This happens through a simple process of diffusion through the capillary walls, hence them having to be so thin. Now from here, once they've deposited the oxygen, picked up the carbon dioxide, they begin their return journey. They start to enlarge to form venules and then again enlarge to become veins. So carrying carbon dioxide back to the heart, from where it can be shifted to the lungs and then it can be exhaled. Hemoglobin changes colour from red and carrying oxygen to the tissues and then to blue when it's transporting carbon dioxide away. As you can see, most notably, if you look in the wrist, we tend to see the blue vein. Although the arteries are not visible as they tend to be located a little bit deeper down. Now the veins are very cleverly designed to incorporate valves. Now these valves are on the internal walls and they prevent blood going backwards, also prevent it pooling in the extremities and so not reaching the heart. Now it isn't a perfect system. You may have noticed that if you're sitting down and then stand up quite quickly, that you can feel lightheaded sometimes, or perhaps after, say, intense exercise, if you just suddenly stop quickly. And that's because we get this little bit of a pooling effect. It takes a while for the blood to get back. Now, the transporting of blood back to the heart for reoxygenation is referred to, for fairly obvious reasons, as venous return. It's assisted by the skeletal muscles contracting and effectively squeezing the veins. This is why you should really never stop dead when you're exercising, but have a gradual cool down to allow the muscles to help move the blood on its journey and avoid that lightheadedness we just talked about. Having examined the workings of the heart, now let's move to the second ingredient in our title, the respiratory system, or more specifically, the link between the two. As we've already established, blood returns to the heart's right atrium with low oxygen and high carbon dioxide concentrations. It's then forwarded by the right ventricle via the pulmonary artery to the lungs to exchange the gases. The oxygenated blood returns to the heart through the pulmonary veins, which, unlike regular veins we discussed earlier, are not elastic and don't contain their own valves. But they do have a thin layer of muscle that contracts to help shift the blood the short distance back from the lungs to the heart. Now, you may already have spotted an anomaly here, that we usually associate arteries with carrying oxygenated blood to the body and veins as carrying carbon dioxide for removal. But this is reversed when we're talking about the pulmonary system, when we're talking about the blood vessels to and from the lungs. So although we often refer simply to our circulation and think of it in terms of one continuous circuit, we can now appreciate that it actually comprises two separate loops, namely the pulmonary system from the heart to the lungs and back, and then the systemic system to the whole body. Now that we have a basic understanding of blood flow dynamics, let's investigate what happens when we exercise. Firstly, let me introduce the cardiac output. And this is a term that quantifies the workload of the heart being calculated as the sum of the stroke volume, and remember that's the amount of blood that's pumped out with each contraction, multiplied by the pulse rate. So to repeat, it's the sum of the stroke volume multiplied by the pulse. Now, an average value at rest is around 5 litres per minute. And the amazing thing here is that it's not evenly shared, but directed specifically to where it's needed. And this is achieved through a combination of vasodilation and vasoconstriction. What that means is the blood vessels will increase or decrease in diameter respectively, together with selective opening and closing of the capillary beds within the tissues. Now, at rest, about 20% of the blood supply is sent to the skeletal muscle. But things change significantly during exercise, with cardiac input increasing to somewhere in the region of 20 litres per minute, and now around 70% of that going to the working muscles. So, let's get on to the exciting bit, or, well, the exciting bit for me anyway. What sort of exercise do we need to engage in to produce improvements in the cardiovascular system? There are actually many, but here are a few routes to training for benefits in health and sports performance. The first technique, continuous training. As the name suggests, this approach is based around working out at a constant intensity for a specific duration of time. Now, to do this in the gym, or if you're lucky enough to have cardio equipment at home, you can select the manual program and maintain a set workload for however long you intend to exercise. Now, this may be at a certain speed or perhaps a certain resistance level, but it stays the same. Clearly, a longer duration workout will require a lower intensity level to allow you to maintain the pace for that full duration. Similarly, vice versa, if you only have a short time to get your workout in, then perhaps we'd go for a higher intensity. Now, the advantages of this type of training are manifold. The most obvious being that it's simple to use, and for the not so regular exercise, it doesn't have sudden spikes in intensity that could cause discomfort. It also has the great benefit that it allows you to monitor your progress, as you'll soon discover if you're able to work at a higher speed or a higher resistance, or if you can continue for longer. So this might not be challenging enough for more advanced exercises, but it's a great way for beginners to monitor their intensity. Continuous training is usually split into 2 strata, less than 60 minutes or greater than 60 minutes. The shorter durations are usually conducted at a moderate intensity, and the focus will be on burning calories plus the general positive health gains that will result. Now, endurance athletes will sometimes adopt this format using continuous pace, but at a much higher speed, and they'll refer to this as tempo training. The aim here is to exercise at an intensity close to what's called their anaerobic threshold, which is the point where the body begins to accumulate lactic acid in the muscles and fatigue starts to set in. I'm sure we all know that feeling. By doing this, the body's ability to remove the dreaded waste product improves and leads to better performance on race days. Workouts longer than 60 minutes, however, are known as long, slow distance workouts. And believe it or not, that does get abbreviated to LSD. So be careful when you're telling people what it is you're taking to improve your health. So sometimes these sessions, which are ideal for endurance athletes, can be used for training for, say, marathons or triathlons. Now, the benefit of this type of training will be the increases in the number of blood capillaries and the size of the mitochondria, which is where fat is mobilized as an energy source in the cells. So this leads in turn to improved endurance and the ability to draw on fat rather than carbohydrate as a fuel. Now, care should be taken with this type of workout as it can lead to overuse injury. It involves a lot of repetition. So the best way to follow this route is to cross-train whereby you mix different cardio modes to avoid too much repetitive movement. In addition, dehydration is a genuine concern. So taking on board fluid at regular intervals is a must, and don't wait until you're thirsty to take a drink. It's too late by that time. Get frequent sips of water or an isotonic drink that's quickly absorbed, and make sure that we are regularly taking that to restore our electrolyte balance quickly. Now, we hear a lot about electrolytes, perhaps without understanding, but to put it briefly, electrolytes are what your cells need, especially the cells in your heart, muscle and nerves, to carry electrical impulses such as a muscular contraction across themselves or indeed to other cells. Let's move on now to another type of training, something called fartlek training. The term is, it's a word of Swedish origin and translates literally to mean speed play. It was developed originally by runners who changed their pace according to the surface they were running on, or perhaps the gradient as it changed, or even just how they felt at a particular moment in time. Obviously then, there's a lot of variation with this format. So because of that, this has the added bonus of beating the boredom factor, but it's also easily transferable to the pool and to the bike. Cardio machines will usually incorporate a fartlek option, although it won't be called that. It'll be called the random program. If not, you can do this yourself by selecting manual and then changing the speed or the incline. Actually, if you're on a bike, it'll be the resistance, but changing at irregular intervals. So, as well as beating the boredom factor, it also allows for development of different energy systems and different muscle fibers by introducing short, fast bursts. Being able to control the workout intensity, in that you can do more if you feel good and less if you're not having a great day, can lead to a much more enjoyable exercise experience. However, this is probably not for the totally unfit person, as some of the spikes should be quite intense, not to mention the fact that it could be difficult to still read your magazine at these points. Not that I'm suggesting that's what you do on the cardio machines. It also has the drawback of not allowing you to measure your progress because, essentially, if you're doing it correctly, no two workouts should be the same, so you can't really judge if you're getting quicker or not. On a similar note, interval training, not surprisingly, featuring spells of exercise interspersed with low-intensity periods to allow for recovery before the next, are a great way to improve our cardiovascular fitness. So I asked Dr. Stephen Novella, Assistant Professor of Neurology at Yale School of Medicine and a practicing physician, if there are any advantages to different types of training. So let's turn to him to see what he says about interval training in particular.
The exercise of different durations does appear to have a different effect on physiology. The best evidence that we have at this point in time indicates that the most efficient workout is to do what's called interval training. Therefore, you'll do a mild to moderate exercise for 6 to 10 minutes, interspersed with 4-minute bursts of more intense exercise. This appears to be more effective in terms of weight loss and cardiovascular conditioning than sustained exercise all at the same level. But all exercise is good.
Now, interestingly there, Dr. Novella also mentioned that for cardiovascular health, there does appear to be around a 20-minute minimum, but all exercise is good and has physiological and health benefits, even at a short duration. Interval training offers a great way to ease into your fitness, whilst also having a significant impact on your heart health. If the exercise is very high intensity, the following period may even be complete rest, although this isn't the best option as it could result in, remember that blood pooling in the extremities causing dizziness we talked about a little earlier. Plus, keeping on the move will help to flush out the fatigue-inducing lactic acid that builds up in the muscle cells. Now, unlike fartlek training, true interval training has a set structure of work and rest periods, which can vary in their relative duration. For example, we might go fast pace for 60 seconds, followed by an easy pace for 30 seconds. And this would be labelled as a 2-to-1 work-rest ratio. So logically, when designing an interval workout, the higher the intensity, the shorter the interval, and then the longer the rest period will be afterwards. A bout of 15 seconds full-out sprint might be followed by a slow pace of 45 seconds, so that would give us a 1-to-3 work-to-rest ratio. Cardio equipment will always include an interval, although sometimes it might be called the hill program. Again, if it's not a built-in feature, select manual and change the speed or resistance at appropriate times, making sure they're regular times. Now, the whole point of interval training is that it allows you to do a considerable amount of high-intensity exercise, so accelerating your results. You're able to push yourself in the work intervals as you know your body will have time to rest immediately after, enabling the lactic acid to be removed from the muscle cells, so reducing the discomfort that's associated with high-intensity exercise. Think about this. If we did 10 sprints, either on foot, on the bike, or even swimming through the water, of 30 seconds duration with a 1-minute rest, now that's quite manageable and accumulates to 5 minutes of maximal effort. However, if you simply set off on a sprint to see how long you could go and do it for as long as possible, the likelihood is you could only sprint full out for around a minute. So we're not achieving anywhere near the volume of exercise as we did in that first example by doing it in intervals. In addition, it's psychologically easier to work at a higher intensity when you know there's a rest period coming on the near horizon. And this also is an ideal technique for helping to progress your fitness, as you can simply tweak the work-to-rest ratio. Another technique, cross-training, refers to the practice of using different cardio workout modes, either on different days or maybe even within the same workout. Options might include the treadmill, the rower, the stationary cycle if you're in the gym, or alternatively, jogging, cycling, swimming, already perhaps you're thinking triathlon. The beauty of this approach is it helps to relieve boredom by constantly providing a different stimulus, but it also helps to reduce the risk of overuse injuries that are associated with repetitive movement patterns. In addition, since different cardio exercises offer slightly different challenges, this method can lead to better balance in muscle development and also better overall fitness gains. Now, it's not for everyone, however, as complete beginners would have to learn to master several new techniques at once, and some people like familiarity in their routine. Also, if you're planning to compete, maybe in a charity event, it's better to stick with the actual modality you'll be using on the day. Cycling for a few weeks before taking the plunge to swim to raise funds for a local cause might leave you a few strokes short. Now, the great news is that a 2005 study published in the American Journal of Cardiology established that both continuous and interval training techniques are safe for people already suffering some form of coronary artery disease and will produce positive benefits, provided they're performed at a level appropriate to the individual's capabilities. Now, both continuous and interval formats produce statistically similar results in terms of improvements in aerobic capacity, blood pressure, and heart muscle efficiency. However, the interval options led to significantly greater times until exhaustion in a treadmill test. The greater tolerance of demands placed upon the cardiovascular system are thought to tip over into the performance of everyday activities, so producing a notable impact upon our quality of life. Of course, it's important to consult your doctor before beginning any type of intensive exercise. So, there you have it. You now know how your heart works, how it responds to demands placed upon it, and most importantly, how to exercise in order to improve its ability to keep you healthy and on the move. It's fair to say, exercising will not just help you to look better, but actually make you feel better from the inside out. All it takes is between 20 and 30 minutes, 3 to 5 times a week, and your heart could well keep ticking for a long time to come. Breathing is such a natural balance of two processes that it can be viewed pretty much in the same way as we see the union of opposites that exists all around us, such as night and day, dark and light, sleep and wake, and ultimately even life and death. Like many other bodily functions, breathing is usually a subconscious process, even when we exercise and the rate of inspiration increases. Now, because of this, we often take this vital action for granted without having a true appreciation of the many complex actions and reactions that occur within us. But when you consider that breathing patterns can influence our energy levels, our ability to concentrate, the performance of our internal organs, and ultimately our health, then clearly it's worth trying to understand this wonderful process in more detail. I think you'll be amazed to see how introducing a voluntary dimension to your breathing can enable you to harness a variety of benefits. In this lecture, we'll look at the incredible mechanics of breathing, gaining an understanding of how several body parts and body functions work together in perfect harmony to sustain life itself. We'll stop to think about what can go wrong and how to cope with it. Then finally, it'll be audience participation time. I did warn you in the very first lecture in the series, as I'm going to teach you a number of adapted breathing techniques that you can use to your advantage in a variety of everyday situations. I aim to leave you enlightened, empowered, and energized. So, let's get started. On inhaling, the diaphragm contracts and moves downwards. Simultaneously, the small intercostal muscles pull the ribs up and out, which together results in an increase in the volume of the thoracic cavity. This in turn causes a decrease in pressure within the chest, and due to the pressure gradient, air naturally flows from the area of higher pressure, i.e. the atmosphere, to the area of lower pressure in the chest. So air is drawn in through the nostrils and mouth, travels down the larynx or the voice box, and the trachea or the windpipe, which divides then into two bronchial tubes that in turn subdivide to feed the lobes of the lungs. Obviously, this is where the air eventually ends up. As we exhale, the whole process is reversed, beginning with the diaphragm and the intercostal muscles relaxing. That leads to the rib cage returning to its original size, increasing the pressure within and so forcing the air out. Now, also playing their parts are the sinuses, the cavities in the bones of the skull that are connected to the nose, and the cilia or nasal hairs. The sinuses help to regulate temperature, and anyone who's been running on a cold night will be aware that if you gulp air through your mouth, it can actually be quite uncomfortable on the throat, and worse still, it can even irritate your lungs. Now, by warming the air and simply making it more palatable, then the sinuses ensure we're able to continue breathing even in the coldest climates. The cilia that are covered in a sticky mucus play a very important role in acting as a filter to trap germs and foreign particles as they enter within the inhaled air. Interestingly, the saliva performs the same role when we breathe through the mouth. Now, the lungs are actually slightly lopsided, you may be surprised to hear, with the right one comprising of 3 balloon-like lobes and the left made up of only 2 lobes. The bronchial tubes split further into bronchioles, and at the end of these are tiny air sacs known as the alveoli. Blood enters the lungs via the pulmonary arteries, which split into smaller arterioles and then into the capillaries that form a network around those little alveoli. Now, this is where the real magic occurs, as it's here that oxygen is taken up by the red blood cells and carbon dioxide is offloaded into the air to be expelled. Now, exercise depletes oxygen in the venous blood and enhances oxygen exchange at the alveoli. So blood flow through the lungs is fairly sluggish when we're at rest, but may triple during exercise. It's also worth noting that water will be removed from the body at this stage when we breathe out, along with the carbon dioxide. And this is a waste product that results from your body breaking down glucose to generate energy. The oxygenated blood then flows out of the alveolar capillaries, through the venules and back to the heart via the pulmonary veins, as we already know. Now, the heart then pumps the oxygen-rich blood through the arteries to deliver this vital fuel throughout the body. In the earliest stages of life, we have no need to control our breathing. We simply rely on our mother to provide oxygen in the blood her body sends to the fetus. In fact, at this time, the lungs are actually filled with fluid rather than air. Now, postpartum, however, We rely on the breathing center within the medulla of the brainstem to constantly monitor signals from the entire body regarding the amount of oxygen that is needed, and then to respond accordingly. And this is achieved via chemoreceptors within the arteries that detect the amount of carbon dioxide in the bloodstream and send this information to the brain as to whether ventilation should be increased or decreased. When we exercise, the levels of carbon dioxide build up. So the body's response is to elevate the rate and increase the depth of breathing in order to remove it. Otherwise, the blood could become more acidic, which creates an environment that will inhibit the chemical reactions that produce energy. On ceasing exercise, the cadence slows in line with the decreasing levels of carbon dioxide until breathing returns to normal. And this brings us to an important point, one that may come as a surprise. It's actually the need to remove carbon dioxide that drives the breathing mechanism rather than the need to take in oxygen. This is a wholly automatic function with the brain sending messages via the thoracic nerves to activate the respiratory muscles. And I'll give you a quick example. You may have noticed that when you're out of breath, there's an automatic feeling to bend forwards. Now, what actually is happening there is because we want to get rid of the carbon dioxide, the diaphragm needs to push up. By pushing up, it starts to help expel the air. By bending forwards, what we're naturally doing is trying to get gravity to assist in that movement of the diaphragm. And that's why, without even thinking about it, when you're out of breath, you'll bend forwards, because what we're trying to do is get rid of that carbon dioxide. Now, when it comes to a conscious effort to change breathing, perhaps to blow reveille on a trumpet or to sing the national anthem, however, the cerebral cortex of the brain takes over to affect the voluntary actions. Now, when feeling stress, the sympathetic nervous system is stimulated, which can lead to tightness in the respiratory muscles. As a result, the chest expansion is restricted and shallow breathing becomes more apparent, and it's also a little more rapid. And this is referred to as hyperventilation or chest breathing, and is inefficient because it results in us losing too much carbon dioxide. And that's why we're always told to rest and take some deep breaths to restore the natural equilibrium, to breathe deeper down into the lungs where we get a better exchange of gases. Now, interestingly, you may not know, but it's not possible to hold your breath indefinitely. That's why you'll never read of anybody committing suicide this way. The buildup of carbon dioxide would stimulate this reflex action. And anyone who's tried to simply lose consciousness this way would actually begin breathing automatically again. Now, you may be aware that some animals, such as dolphins, seals, they breathe air but can stay underwater for considerable periods of time. Now, this is due to something known as the mammalian diving reflex. But hang on a minute, aren't we also mammals? You can probably see where I'm going here. Believe it or not, we also have this same reflex, although it's a much weaker version. So, if we submerge ourselves in cold water, the body will automatically reduce your pulse rate, redirect the blood to the heart and the brain to sustain life. So this is why the world record for staying underwater is, believe it or not, an astonishing 19 minutes and 21 seconds, set by a Swiss freediver, Peter Kolat. I still find that figure incredible. Now, amazing as it sounds, it shouldn't come as a surprise to you that in such a complex system, there are lots of opportunities for things to go awry. In fact, the British Lung Foundation lists 35 different pulmonary disorders on their website, and the American Lung Association lists 37. So let's look at some of the better-known problems. Asthma. Asthma is a condition whereby the tubes that carry air to the lungs become irritated, as a result, sometimes narrowing and perhaps producing more mucus than normal, restricting the ability to breathe. We can't be absolutely sure what causes it, although we do know that allergies can exacerbate it. It can't be cured, but it can be controlled with appropriate medication. COPD is an abbreviation for chronic obstructive pulmonary disease. And it's actually an umbrella term covering a number of conditions such as emphysema, where the alveoli lose their elasticity and so their ability to take in oxygen. and bronchitis that sees a buildup of phlegm that causes coughing. The most common cause of these is smoking, although occupational pollution, for example, dust from industrial processes, can also be a contributor. Lung cancer develops, we know, when cells change shape and grow, linking with other damaged cells to form a tumour that can then grow and spread to other parts of the lung and beyond, usually very slowly. As I'm sure you know, you don't need me to tell you that smoking is the key issue here. And pneumonia, it's an infection that's transmitted via breathing in germs that causes the alveoli to become filled with fluid and so then inflamed. And again, this restricts the ability to transfer oxygen into the bloodstream. Now, with around 33 million people suffering from chronic lung disease in the US alone, any self-help advice will clearly be of great value. Now, several studies, including the famous Framingham Health Study, have found that measures of lung function are the best predictors of lifespan. Maximal oxygen uptake, or aerobic capacity, declines with age in both men and women, except for those involved in endurance training. But research has shown that much of this decline can be attributed to loss of muscle mass rather than to age itself. Now, exercise enhances cardiorespiratory function by improving the body's ability to move oxygen into the bloodstream and transport it to the working muscles where it can be used in metabolic processes. So one thing's for certain, regular exercise can be of benefit to all maladies of the lungs. And when you exercise regularly, your body creates less lactic acid. As a result, there is less demand on the lungs to provide oxygen to help remove it, and nothing to agitate the symptoms of any lung condition you may already have. Now, try not to be put off by the fact that exercise will not be easy to begin with. You will feel short of breath quite quickly, but if you don't commit to regular activity, your muscles will just become weaker. Everyday tasks will feel more difficult, and you could enter into a downward spiral that leads to poor quality of life. So if necessary, start with just a few minutes at a time, but then aim to gradually build up the duration. The American Lung Association, great help here, they give the following advice regarding exercise. Surprisingly, they suggest we begin by coughing. Cough first of all to help you clear the airways of mucus. It's important to practice deep breaths, inhaling for 2 counts and exhaling for 4 counts, but more about that later. Slow down if you're exercising and you feel fatigue or breathless. And don't aim for too high an intensity of exercise. Just an activity that raises your heart rate around 20 beats above your resting heart rate. And with that in mind, walking's probably the ideal option, and you should commit to 2 short sessions each day if you can, morning and late afternoon, rather than 1 long session. Always consult your medical practitioner before beginning a new exercise regime, and obviously if you experience any difficulty once you get started. Now, even if you don't have any kind of lung disorder, breathing exercises can contribute to your health and well-being. You may be thinking, right, hang on, I've been breathing all my life. Do I really need any lessons? Well, they helped me over the course of the last 30, 35 years since I first started doing karate as a child. I learned the importance of conscious breathing. And I've been fascinated by this subject ever since, and have made it a personal mission almost to constantly try to learn new techniques and then road test them in various situations and with different clients, with different groups, and of course, on myself. So from the world of martial arts to sports psychology, and from remedial therapy to yoga, there's a collection of exercises you can try. And we're going to try them now, because these can be applied to everyday situations. Remember, like any other form of exercise, practice makes perfect. So there's no time like the present. Why don't we start right now? So let's work our way through a range of breathing exercises that have different benefits. And what I'm going to do with each of these exercises is just show you the basis, how to do the technique. And then we'll practice just 3 breaths together, so you get a feel for how the exercise works. But this is something that you can practice yourself. The important point is, you can be doing this most of them you can do anywhere, in any position. But for now, I'm assuming you're sitting, so I've taken the chance to sit as well. Although I will ask you a couple of times to get up and down. And really, at the top of the first lecture in this series, we talked about the whole series being interactive. And this really is interactive. If you don't join me for these next few exercises, it's going to be pretty boring TV for a while, because we're really just working through breathing in and out, but working through some different techniques. Now, just to give you an idea how important this is, because as we've already established, breathing is a very primary function. What's important about this is how it can affect your posture. Now, a common poor posture is what we call a head forward position, where the chin is protracted and the shoulders roll forwards. Now, a lot of people will think that this kind of position comes from our sedentary lifestyle, from maybe sitting at a desk, maybe driving too much, that we end up in this sort of shoulders forward, chin forward position. Well, actually, it's possible that the reason for this poor posture could be simply poor breathing mechanics. What will happen is, if the breathing isn't as it should be, if we're not functioning as well as we should, the body has an amazing knack through this process called homeostasis of trying to constantly correct things. What it will do is try to put you in the best position to enable you to breathe properly. So what will happen is, by stretching the chin forwards, it actually causes a stretch on the neck. Okay? By rolling the shoulders forwards, it'll cause a stretch through the pectoralis minor. Now, what actually happens is, these muscles are responsible for helping to lift the rib cage, for helping you to breathe in. And by putting them in a stretch, first of all, because they're naturally elastic and want to contract, they'll then, by definition, find it easier to lift the rib cage. So this position might be caused by having poor breathing technique. So this is what we're going to do. I'm going to start first of all with a cleansing breath. Now, you may have heard people talk about a cleansing breath. And the point here is, what we're trying to do is expel carbon dioxide, which is a toxin, and we're also trying to release tension in the sinuses. Now, as I said, with all of these exercises, you can do them in any position, and the beauty is you can do them at home or at work. We're going to start with your mouth gently closed. You're going to inhale deeply, being sure that your tummy's rising, so that's something to look out for. But then we'll exhale quickly, causing a quick contraction through the diaphragm, forcefully driving the air out through your nose. So clearly through this technique, the in-breath will be much longer than the out-breath. So shall we have a go at this? And the important point here in terms of cleansing is that breathing through the nose, we filter the air. So I want you to actually think that as you're breathing here, that I'm taking in cleaner air as we do this. So ideally, you're going to sit up nice and tall for this. Let's give ourselves room to move. Also, drop the shoulders down. Get a nice distance from the shoulders to the ears. So this is what we're going to do. Take the deep breath in through your nose. And then quickly exhale through the nose again. Okay? So it's a long, slow breath, and then quickly exhale through the nose. Things to look out for. On the breath in, I want to see this expansion through your tummy. So just observe that breath. We're going to try this 3 times. Take your deep breath in. So you're looking for this expansion of the tummy as the diaphragm pushes down, which allows us to take in more air. A couple more times. So be aware of how that affects your posture. Taking that deep breath in, you may feel yourself, even getting taller, feel yourself lengthening through that position. And be aware that as the diaphragm pushes down, what should happen is the tummy should distend forward slightly. Okay, so that's a little cleansing breath that helps us to expel the carbon dioxide. Let's move on. Our second technique, and this is a great exercise for energizing yourself, for really giving you energy. It's a great exercise to do first things in the morning. So sitting in a comfortable position with a long spine again. So if you're sitting in a chair, you want to be sort of towards the end of the chair here. So again, we're keeping the mouth closed, breathing in and out through the nose only. But what we're doing here is breathing quite quickly, looking at a rate of about 2 to 3 breaths per second. And to aid this process, a little bit of visualization helps. So imagine a bicycle pump being used to inflate a tire. So you may feel a little bit of stress in terms of muscular effort at the base of the neck, maybe in the chest, maybe even in the abdomen as well. But that's good, because what we're doing is we're taxing the respiratory muscles, and over time they'll strengthen, so that's a good thing. However, we do need to avoid the risk of hyperventilating. And so what we'll do is we'll stick to just 5 seconds first of all. That's all we'll do, and we can gradually build that up as you get more familiar with this exercise. Okay, so we're sitting tall. So your aim is to breathe in, out, in, out, in, out as quickly as possible. We're looking for just about 5 seconds, okay? So let's have a go at that. Sitting up tall, just through the nose. And take a little rest there, okay? So you may already be beginning to feel a little bit of effort in those respiratory muscles through the neck, maybe a little bit through the pecs, through the intercostals, maybe down in the diaphragm. Let's try it again. And relax. So you're trying to work as quickly as you can, and this is great to energize yourself, to get the energy flowing around your body. Remember how important oxygen is to us as a fuel for movement. One more time, please. And take a little rest. So remember, the aim is to start with around 5 seconds, and maybe we can gradually begin to build that up. And also, it's probably best practice first thing in the morning after you wake up. Super exercise. Okay, so let's move on. What about a strengthening exercise? And this can improve your endurance and the efficiency of the nervous system, the digestive system. It's a great exercise. So many people will use this to give them extra courage, you know, that idea of take a deep breath before you do something. So if you've attended a yoga class, you may already be familiar with this technique. It's what's called a Ujjayi breath. So the mouth's closed. You're going to inhale slowly through the nose, but then what we're going to do is close the glottis by lifting the back of the tongue to the roof of your mouth. Then when you exhale, again through the nose, what you'll find is that there's a little vibration, and your key here is to focus on the vibration and the noise. Okay? So we take a deep breath in through the nose. Lift the tongue at the back to the top of the mouth, and now exhale. You'll notice there's the noise, you'll notice there's a vibration. So let's try that 3 more times. One more, please. And relax. Okay, so that's a technique that's used to give you a little bit of courage, give you a little bit of strength. So if you're just about to head into a challenging situation, that's a technique to use for a few moments before. Now, what about working out? The great thing about your breath is that you can use it when you're working out. Certainly holding your breath is not something that's advised when you're exercising. So the golden rule here is to exhale on the effort. Okay? And this will give you an extra dynamism to your movement and allow you to perform better and therefore achieve better results. So for example, let's take an exercise that I can do right here sitting in the chair. Let's say I'm going to do a tricep dip. So you can join me for this. Hands on the chair, lift your backside off the chair. All I'm going to ask you to do is bend the elbows, lower yourself down slightly, and then press up. That's all we're going to do. Down and press up. Now just relax for a second. So a little bit of an exercise that works the tricep muscles. Now what we're going to do here is focus on using the breath. So the effort is the bit where we're lifting against gravity. So what I'm going to ask you to do is take a deep breath in on the way down, then exhale on the way up as you lift your body weight against gravity. So let's lift ourselves off the chair. Make sure you're stable. Take a deep breath in and exhale as you push up. Let's go again. Breathe in and out. And in and out. And relax back onto the chair. So you feel how that gives you that little bit more dynamism when you're moving. So with any resistance type of exercise, the exertion, the hardest part of the exercise, when you're lifting the weight or lifting your body against gravity, that's the time to have a real blowout. Okay? okay? So let's try taking that a step further from working out into sport. If you train your lungs to perform better and your body to deliver and utilize oxygen more efficiently, then obviously you'll be better at sport. And we do this using timing variations. So if you're running, we use a technique of maybe counting a 1-2 ratio, which is 1 breath in for 2 strides and 1 out for 2 strides. So a great technique for training your respiratory system through these breaths. Now you can use this for swimming. In swimming, you could count the number of breaths you take from one end of the pool to the other. And your challenge is to swim the next lap, but with fewer breaths. And cyclists, you can use this by counting the number of revolutions of the pedals to each breath. And particularly, that's something to focus on when you're on uphill stretches. So you can start to use that to train your breathing techniques while you're practicing sport, and you'll reap the benefit. Let's move on. Let's try a de-stress technique now. And this will relax both the mind and the body. And this is probably works better if you're lying on the floor, but you can do it sitting in the chair. The important point is to sit yourself back and let yourself feel heavy. So rather than the other exercise where you're sitting forward, you're actually going to sit back and really sink into your chair. Now, ideally for this one, you'll close your eyes and breathe in and out through the nose. And your aim is to take long, slow breaths. And you're trying to fully inflate the lungs rather than simply taking your usual, what we call your tidal breath, that really only works about 1/3 of your lung capacity. So maintaining a comfortably slow rhythm, I want you to simply focus on listening to your inward breath. Yeah. Also, I want you to be aware that nasal breathing warms the air. So what we're trying to do here is focus on that warmth being pushed down into your center and your whole body temperature gently increasing from the inside out. So let's take a few breaths. I'm going to shut up. Listen to your breath. And now at the same time, focus on feeling the warmth as you breathe through the nose and take it deep down into your center. One more breath. And open your eyes again. Great one. Now I'm going to move on to my final technique, which is a technique for pain relief. Okay, this is a very useful technique. Again, we're sitting in a comfortable position, but upright, taking a deep breath in through the nose. And what you're going to do here is hold for a count of 7, and then gently exhale through the mouth for a count of 8. And again, this is based on a yoga breathing technique. So you're going to try to expel all the air as you breathe out. And what I want you to notice here is how it engages your deeper abdominal muscles, and you may even begin to feel that it draws your ribs down towards your hips, towards the end of the cycle. Now the aim here is to try to block out any thoughts coming into your head and focus simply on the count as you inflate and as you fully empty the lungs. So we're going to take a deep breath in, and then we're going to hold for a count of 7. So take a deep breath in, as much air as you can, and hold. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Slowly breathe out for 1, 2, 3, 4. Start to blow. 6, 7, and 8. So did you start to feel there that as you're breathing out, and as you start to blow to make sure we get all that air out, you start to feel this engagement of the abdominal muscles? Let's try it again. Deep breath in, as much air as you can, and hold it for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and blow out for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. And relax there. So did you begin to feel it as you're blowing out? It starts to work a little bit into the deeper abdominals and draws the ribs down towards the hips. So there we have a whole range of breathing exercises that you can use in different situations Remember, as with any exercise, they get better with practice. There exists an abundance of research into breathing exercises, and it's clear that mastering them can enhance the parasympathetic nervous system, can improve cardio function, can decrease the effects of stress, and improve both mental and physical health. So, try to incorporate the techniques you've just learned into your day-to-day routine, as I'm sure there are often times when you feel you could do with a little extra energy, perhaps better concentration, certainly a bit less stress. Well, now you know how. You now know the secrets of the breath of life. Try to picture this. You get out of bed tomorrow morning feeling relaxed, happy, optimistic for no specific reason. Then you go to work with a smile on your face, a spring in your step, and a cheeriness in your attitude that leaves your colleagues wondering what you've taken. But you know it's just the real you, being true to yourself, and it feels good. Let me ask you, would you need stress management? Of course not. But then, how often do you really wake up in the morning feeling like this? Stress has become such a common word within the national lexicon that it's hard to believe it was only first uttered in the 1950s when Hungarian Dr. Hans Selye introduced the term after pioneering studies in this field. When you consider that, according to the American Psychological Association, around 75% of Americans experience stress symptoms every month, and around a third report feeling they are living with extreme stress, then it's no surprise it's such a well-used term. If I now tell you that stress causes over half of us to argue with those close to us, and workplace stress costs around $300 billion each year in healthcare, I think you'll have to agree that anything we can do to prevent it has got to be worth investing a little time and effort in. The aim of this workshop is to open the lid on stress in order to help you to understand the many possible root causes and to alert you to the tapestry of symptoms that can arise. More importantly, we will look at the role that carefully prescribed exercise can play in reducing your risk of suffering stress, and we'll investigate a number of specific self-help tactics you can try yourself that are guaranteed to help put the smile back on your face. So, a logical starting point would be to define stress. What is stress? The American Institute of Stress suggests that it's difficult to define it precisely, as it affects us all in so many different ways, and so it can elicit varying symptoms. At the basis of understanding stress is the fact that it's a primitive reflex, the part of your brain that processes a response to any circumstance that causes anxiety is not wholly under your control. Also, it cannot tell the difference between emotional anger and physical danger, and always reacts as if you'd just caught sight of a pack of hungry wolves. So the reflex takes the form of a set of changes in body chemistry which make you ready to fight or to run away. And this is why nervousness and anxiety often show in a fast pulse, rapid breathing and sweating. Of course, the extent of the reaction will vary according to whether the wolves are a smudge on the horizon or running slavering into the mouth of your cave. It's fair to say the vagaries of life in the 21st century imply that many of us lead lives in which stress is inherent in far too much of our normal daily routine, and our bodies are constantly in this state of heightened activity. Now, if this goes on for an extended period of time, it can lead to a number of unpleasant consequences, from feelings of anxiety and depression through various aches and pains to serious illnesses. Some of the first indicators of stress getting the better of you can include headaches, neck pain, digestive problems, frequent colds, and an irregular heartbeat. You could also develop irrational behavior patterns such as eating or drinking too much, gambling, making impulse purchases. Your moods may fluctuate from moments of absolute joy to angry outbursts or even periods of withdrawal. Unfortunately, stress can manifest itself in one particularly visible symptom, due to the influence of cortisol, a hormone that is produced in the adrenal glands and is released into the body during exercise, fasting, and of course stress. The role of cortisol is to regulate energy supply by selecting the most appropriate fuel, that could be carbohydrate, fat, or protein, to meet the requirements of your body. The problem is that cortisol relies upon an enzyme found in adipose or fat tissue in order to do its work. So more stress then requires more active cortisol, and so greater fat stores are laid down specifically in the abdominal area. There's no doubt, therefore, that high stress levels can directly affect your waistline. One of the best defenses we have against stress, benefiting our minds as well as our waistlines, of course, then is exercise. So I asked Robert Sapolsky, Professor of Biological Sciences at Stanford University and Professor of Neurology and Neurosurgery at Stanford School of Medicine, to describe what goes on in the brain to make us feel better when we exercise.
Exercise. We all know exercise is good for stress, or good for reducing stress, hopefully. And scientists actually know a ton about how that works. Certain level is insofar as exercise is cleaning out your blood vessels of all sorts of crud and making you more sensitive to your insulin. It's going to help your health, and that obviously reduces stress. But there's some much more specific mechanisms as well. One of the areas you would love to have plaques and stuff cleaned out by exercise is blood vessels in your brain, and exercise is good for that. Also, another surprising thing is when you exercise, you're actually delivering more oxygen and glucose to your brain. And not just to areas that make sense in terms of, there's all sorts of neurons there that have to make you breathe at the right rate to sort of match your energy demands with the exercising, but your entire brain, including parts of your brain that have to do with pleasure, with relaxation, with anti-stress effects. Totally amazing thing is there's a class of brain chemicals called neurotrophins. They're growth factors. They make neurons grow new perky connections between each other and get a whole lot better at communicating and faster. And turns out that exercise causes your brain cells to make more of these things. Finally, in terms of the nuts and bolts physiology, thing we all know turns out to be absolutely true, which is get the right amount of exercise and your brain gets marinated in endorphins and it really does feel good. And there's a hardcore biology explaining why it feels good. Exercise reduces stress, definitely.
In most circumstances, at home, work, or even play, stress carries a negative connotation. However, a totally stress-free existence may also have drawbacks. We could lose the ability to react to the different challenges that life throws at us. As counterintuitive as it sounds then, a degree of stress is essential for optimal health. But we need to be able to control it. We need to be able to switch it off when necessary. To supplement the physical exercise programs, more and more people are turning to the world of relaxation and meditation techniques for help. Certainly, practicing relaxation techniques can bring many benefits, although, like stress, it's very personal. Hence, the experience varies between individuals. Despite this variance, the medical fraternity recognise relaxation as a treatment for a number of stress-related ailments, such as hypertension, insomnia, asthma, chronic pain, cardiac arrhythmia, and phobic anxiety. Now, the physiological effects include a lower heart rate, lower blood pressure, lower blood cortisone levels. All of these changes are consistent with a generalized decrease in activity of the sympathetic nervous system. And they're distinctly different from the physiological changes observed when sleeping. We might think of watching television or reading a book as relaxing, but true relaxation needs to be learnt in order to effectively release tension from the muscles and to slow the breathing rate. Techniques include using words such as heavy and warm. There's progressive muscle relaxation, focusing your attention on various parts of the body, to consciously release tension, and breathing techniques that help to instill calm. Now, for people who regularly practice relaxation techniques, it can also provide a heightened sense of self-awareness, clarity of the mind, anger control, very useful, can also help to strengthen the immune system. Now, relaxation differs from meditation and that it's primarily aimed at and also benefits the body, whereas meditation is actually a form of mental exercise based on the belief that the mind determines our quality of life. The two are linked, as relaxation is often the route to accessing meditation and could be a secondary effect of meditative practice. Much has been said and written about meditation, and it can take years to understand its exact nature. But the essence of meditation is in paying attention. It can be described as being a deep form of rest, relaxation, but still with a neurological awareness. It's characterized by moments of stillness that balance a life of activity. It allows us to practice detachment, being able to take ourselves outside our everyday thoughts. And it also gives an insight into the nature of subjective thought. Now, meditation's not exclusively Eastern, esoteric, mystical, or a religious exercise, but it's actually, like physical exercise, it's a means to an end. Meditation can be included as an essential part of a fitness routine, and even sitting for just 1 minute at the end of a workout can make a difference. As with exercise, a little of something is better than a lot of nothing. Now, the aim of meditation is to focus inward and to a large extent to forget about the body and allow the limbs and the physical body to become totally relaxed. While fully concentrated in meditation, it's possible to lose awareness of any pain or discomfort in the body, or to notice it and not even care. The more time spent in meditation, the more time the body remains relaxed. Some people find that meditating even reduces their need for sleep. It may sound counterintuitive again, but setting aside time for meditation can be even more important as our schedules seem to get busier by the day. Although there are different types of meditation techniques, there are two main categories of meditation: concentration and contemplation. So first, let's look at a concentrative technique. In order to aid concentration, it's possible to choose perhaps an object for our attention. For example, observing or counting breaths, using a repetitive sound such as chanting a mantra, or an image, maybe a candle flame. When you notice your attention beginning to wander, simply try to bring your attention back. This is the object of meditation, without judging yourself or worrying about it, but bring yourself back to what it is you're focusing on. The second technique, the contemplative technique or mindfulness, is based on the underlying principle that most meditative techniques provide an individual with a means to gain first-hand insight into the way our mind works. Contemplative meditation normally builds upon the concentrative technique. Once the mind is calm, the object of concentration is put aside and the flow of mental images and sensations is observed as they just naturally arise. So, as alluded to earlier, in the area of relaxation and meditation, it's important to note that one size definitely doesn't fit all. Techniques that work for one person may well just leave another person confused or uncomfortable. So you should treat the practice as a journey of self-discovery. Ideally, then, you should endeavour to evolve in this area by exposing yourself to learning a broad spectrum of practices. And here are a few you can try at your leisure. The stress-fighting endorphins released during exercise can also be unleashed by laughter. And surprisingly, your body can't distinguish whether the laughter is real or fake. So laughter therapy is a recognised technique that works in both group and individual situations and starts with a warm-up, usually a little bit of mobilising of the upper body, followed by a range of activities designed to get you giggling. Based on solid studies, Blood samples taken from 2 groups revealed that cortisol in the subjects who watched a comedy show decreased more rapidly than in a control group. Research also revealed that the concentration of natural killer cells, a type of immune cell that attacks virus and tumour, is increased through laughter. These cells are suppressed if the body suffers consistent and long-term stress. Now, you'll no doubt already know that listening to music can be relaxing. Experts suggest that it's specifically the rhythm of the music that produces the calming effect, as it's thought that there's a link back to when we were in the mother's womb and we were influenced by the heartbeat. So listening to soothing music, therefore, we associate it with that very early, safe, relaxing, protective environment provided by our mother. Now, there's no single music genre that's good for everyone. And surprisingly, studies have revealed that some relaxation-type CDs actually produce adverse reactions in certain people. So, personal preference is key. Ideally, you want to sit or lie in a comfortable position, preferably headphones to avoid any distractions. And the feeling is, let the music wash over you. Allow it to rinse away the stresses of your day. Let your breathing slow and listen for repeating patterns in the music, or maybe spaces between notes. Try to observe what's going on there. Now, juggling work pressures, family commitments, and money is something we're all familiar with. But did you know that learning to juggle real objects can actually help you to better cope with those common stressors? By improving concentration skills, providing a link between the left and right brain, improving mental agility and problem-solving functions, we find that we can take our conscious and subconscious mind away from issues that cause mental malaise. It's a useful distraction, and juggling is a perfect vehicle for this. Surprisingly, it's easier than you think to master the basic 3-ball cascade. If your learning approach is step by step, now from there the fun really starts, because once you get the hang of that basic 3-ball cascade, you can start to get creative and develop a few tricks. So to start with, let's take just 1 ball. Yeah, just going to start with 1 ball. And the skill here is to get a consistent throw. So our first level, starting your dominant hand, is to practice sweeping the hand across to the tummy button and then letting the ball go. Yeah. So try to avoid throwing it from hand to hand. Yeah. Just simply sweep the hand across and let go. So you've got this kind of cupping movement like so. And what will happen then is the ball will go straight up in the middle like so. Now what we're aiming for here is a consistent throw. So ideally, it's always going to about head height, maybe slightly higher, always to the same height every time, in a rhythm. So that is your first level. So how about you press pause and get a little practice. Okay, so moving on to the second level. That seems easy, but it's important to get the throw consistent. So the second level, we're going to start again, throwing with the dominant hand. And all I'm going to ask you to do, and this is where it becomes a real mind-body exercise, you need to talk to yourself. Yeah? I want you to say, throw and catch. Yeah? Actually say it at the time you do it. What's going to happen is I'm going to throw and catch, but in order to allow me to catch, I'm going to drop this ball. So this is what happens. Throw, catch. That's all you need to do, simply drop the ball. Yeah? Should we try that again? Starting your dominant hand, we throw and catch. Now really, to make this work, to really get that mind-body link, you need to talk to yourself. Okay? So I'm going to let you practice that a few times. Say to yourself, throw, catch. Just drop that other ball. Moving on to the next level, it's pretty much the same, only this time I'm still saying to myself, throw and catch, but instead of dropping the second ball, I'm just going to throw it. I'm not really fussed about where it goes. So again, starting your dominant hand, say, throw, catch. Throw, catch. But you see now I've thrown that other ball. Yeah? So you're still doing the same thing, saying throw and catch, but now I'm throwing that second ball. Throw, catch. Yeah? Okay, so have a little practice at that. Now you've probably guessed what's happening next. What I'm going to do now is to move on to the next level. That second ball, I want to catch it. So the way to do this is to say to yourself, throw, throw, catch, catch. Okay? Throw, throw, catch, catch. Throw, throw, catch, catch. Now, let's be honest, the first few times it's going to go all over the place. And this will apply to every stage. Once that happens, put one of the balls away and just take a little brain break. Go back to here, practice this, because if we don't have consistent throws from both hands, it's going to go completely awry. So, this is the level. Throw, throw, catch, catch. Speak to yourself while you're doing it. Throw, throw, catch, catch. Throw, throw, catch, catch. Start in your dominant hand. Avoid throwing the ball from one hand to the other. Just sweep it across so that it goes up in the middle. Throw, throw, catch, catch. Throw, throw, catch, catch. I'll give you a moment to practice that level. We're getting closer now. Let's take the third ball, okay? If you've not got these balls, oranges work. I actually learned to juggle with oranges. I would, as a tip, make sure you use something that doesn't break, and also move everything out of the way while you're practicing. So, this is what we're going to do. We're going to start with 2 balls in your dominant hand. Now, the secret here is to have one held near the heel of the palm and the other held towards the end of the fingers. Okay? So, this is what we're going to do. Exactly the same thing as you've just done. Throw, throw, catch, catch. But in order to allow me to catch the second ball, I'm going to drop the third ball. So it'll look like this. Throw, throw, catch, catch. Yeah? So I'm ending up exactly where I was before, but now I've dropped that third ball. Yeah? The beauty of juggling balls is they don't bounce and roll away. So if you've got tennis balls or golf balls, they could be all over the place. The beauty of these things is, and they're called thuds because that's the noise they make when they hit the floor. So throw, throw, catch, catch, and just drop that ball. Yeah? So it's still the same level as before, but we need to drop the ball. Throw, throw, catch, catch. Have a little practice. Okay, we're getting really close now. We're getting really close. So this time, still the same. Throw, throw, catch, catch. But, in case you hadn't guessed, we're going to throw the third ball. So, throw, throw, catch, catch. Just throw that third ball, let it go wherever it goes. So we're still doing throw, throw, catch, catch, but we're throwing the third ball. Yeah? So, throw, throw, catch, catch. Yeah? Don't worry about where that third ball goes. So we're just moving one level further than before. Should we try that again? Start with the 2 balls in your dominant hand. Throw, throw, catch, catch. Throw that other ball away. Okay, have a little practice. Remember, if it all goes completely belly up, take a brain break, practice that single arm throw, because it's all about having a consistent throw. Have a go. Okay, I think this is what they call the moment of truth. So, the secret now, and again, it's so important to talk because it's a mind-body link. The secret now is to say to yourself, throw, 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 throw. Yeah? That's all you've got to do. What should happen is throw, 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 throw. Yeah? You've just got to say to yourself, throw, 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 throw. Now, let's be honest. What's probably going to happen is we'll get a couple of the ways through and then the ball will go all over the place. You may find yourself walking forwards while you're doing it. Yeah? So, have a couple of goes and then go back, whether you've got it or not, to just a single ball. It's important to keep going back to this stage. Yeah? If it completely goes to pieces, let's go back to the stage before. Yeah? We can always drop back to the stage before. But trust me, the secret here is the mind-body link. If you say to yourself, throw, 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 lo and behold, you should be juggling, and that's when the fun really starts. because then we can start to do all sorts of little tricks with it. So that's your 3-ball cascade, yeah? Only one way to do it, practice. Now don't worry if you don't get it right. Even just tossing a single ball back and forth will help to reduce stress. Now if writing comes naturally to you, then take a blank piece of paper, write down your thoughts and feelings, as just this alone can really help you to clear your mind. This can be particularly useful before going to sleep or when you first wake up. Seeing things written down on paper can generally give you a fresh perspective. Now the following techniques you can try. So perhaps you can try them right now. You can press pause and I'll give you a moment to have a go at them. I'm going to start with a physical technique, as stretching the muscles can release tension. So a couple of exercises you can do. Firstly, a little stretch for the neck, shoulders and back. So if you're sitting in a chair, you'll need to sit up comfortably. I'm going to show you how to do this, and you're going to hold these stretches for around 15 seconds. If you take one hand and press it down to the side and take the ear to the shoulder, we'll start to feel a stretch through the neck. You're going to do that on both sides and hold for about 15 seconds. That really begins to release the tension through the neck. What we then do is take the hands up to about chest level, clasp them together in front, and just simply press forwards. And we feel the shoulder blades spread apart, the elbows are slightly bent. That's a really good way of reducing the tension through the upper back. And the opposite of that is to take both hands behind you, place them in the lower back, just above the buttocks, and keeping the tummy pulled in, squeezing the elbows towards each other and holding that position. What that's going to do is release the tension through the chest and through the shoulders at the front. So that's a very physical way of reducing tension through the muscles. Next, let's try a basic breathing exercise. If you place the palms on the rib cage at the side, right to right and left to left, the fingers are spread, and just as you take those deep breaths in and out, feel the rib cage expanding. Yeah? Now what I'm going to ask you to do is to apply a little bit of pressure with the hands. As you inhale, you have to work that little bit harder now through the respiratory muscles to expand the rib cage, and then relax. So try that a few times. That'll help you to relax through the whole upper body, but also it starts to calm the mind. And yoga classes are a great way to learn more breathing techniques. Now, another great technique, and this is effectively a concentrative meditation technique. It's a technique developed by Dr. Herbert Benson, a Harvard Medical School professor and a pioneer in the field of alternative medicine. In order to aid concentration, choose an object for your attention. For example, think of a word that helps you to relax. So it might be peace or calm, whatever it is. Each time you take a breath in, think of the word, say it to yourself slowly, and make it last the length of the out breath. Okay? Breathe in. As you exhale, say the word, make it last the length of the breath. Now you may notice your attention begins to wander. Don't try to block out these incoming thoughts. Let them come, but then let them go and go back to focusing on your word. Yeah? Now, if you find difficulty choosing a word that works for you, you can do this with a candle, as we mentioned earlier. You can even do this when you're on the move, counting how many strides you walk with each in and out breath. It's a great technique for helping to reduce tension. So lastly, we'll try a method attributed to Laura Mitchell, a renowned London physiotherapist who discovered that relaxation in the muscles could be initiated by certain mindful movements. Now this follows a specific set of instructions, and you'll need to practice them to become familiar. Now you'll notice that each movement command is followed by a stop, which is important as it ensures you cease moving that body part and prepare for the next joint action. So get yourself ready for this, because you're actually going to do this one with me now. So it is best done lying down, and you only need to hear me, so you could do that. But if not, you can still do it in a seated position. So let's get ready to try Mitchell's relaxation technique. This technique is best done lying down, but it can be adapted to a sitting position. Just make sure you're in a comfortable chair and you're sinking back into the chair. So we'll begin. Firstly, pull your shoulders towards your feet and stop. Now feel that the shoulders are further away from your ears. Your neck feels longer, and we've released the tension through the muscles in the neck and shoulders. Roll your elbows out and open and stop. Be aware of feeling the upper arms moved away from the rib cage. And the weight of both arms should now be resting on the support. Gently extend your fingers and thumbs and stop. Be aware of feeling the fingers slightly stretched, separated, and just gently touching the support. Turn your hips out and stop. Feel the thighs have rolled and the kneecaps are now facing slightly outwards. Just gently bend and extend and bend and extend the knees, just gently to find a comfortable position. And stop. Be aware of that comfort through the knees. Push your toes away from you. And stop. Release that and feel the heaviness of the feet. Begin to push your torso into the floor or the chair and stop. Be aware of your contact and the support of your body. Now push your head into the support and stop. Feel the contact in the head and also the support. Pull the jaw down and stop. Feel the teeth have separated. The jaw feels a little heavy and the lips are just touching. Now press the tongue downwards in the mouth and stop. Feel how that now releases the tension through the throat. The tongue should feel loose. Close your eyes, screw the eyes up tightly, and stop. Now just let the eyelids gently rest over the eyes. Take a moment to enjoy the darkness. Now, beginning at the eyebrows, I want you to imagine, don't move, just imagine you are smoothing your fingertips up the forehead, into the hairline, over the hair, and down the back of the neck. Nice and slowly. And stop. Take a few moments to focus on your breath. Try to be aware of taking deeper, slower breaths. And when you're ready, just open the eyes and get used to the amount of light in the room. And slowly begin to return your mind to the present. And in your own time when you're ready, not in a rush, you'll sit yourself up and carry on about your day. If trying these techniques has triggered an interest in meditation for you, then remember the Great Courses offers another course, Mindfulness, with Professor Musi, and you might want to try that out. So, as I said, relaxation is a particularly individual domain, so the techniques we've just tried may or may not have worked for you. The fun is in finding out, so I hope you'll continue the journey we've just started, as it's essential to protect yourself from the debilitating effects of stress that we talked about earlier. The old maxim, prevention is better than cure, should not merely be the reason behind sticking religiously to your oral hygiene, but also applies just as readily to your relationship that is stress. Now, the good news is you don't have to fly to a deserted island, you don't have to chant under waterfalls, or do yourself a mischief trying to fold your legs into the lotus position to release stress. Once you get started with these exercises that are designed to fit in around your working day, you'll soon be able to come up with a few more of your own. All you need to do is find a quiet space and take a little meaningful me time.